the Fiend. In a certain country there lived an old couple who had a daughter called Marussia, Mary. In their village it was customary to celebrate the feast of Saint Andrew I, called November. The girls used to assemble in some cottage, bake pampushki, and enjoy themselves for a whole week, or even longer. Well, the girls met together once when this festival arrived, and brewed and baked what was wanted. In the evening came the lads with the music, bringing liquor with them, and dancing and revelry commenced. All the girls danced well, but Marussia the best of all. After a while there came into the cottage such a fine fellow. "Marry, come up," regular blood and milk, and smartly and richly dressed. "Hail, fair maidens," says he. "Hail, good youth," say they. "Your merry-making? Be so good as to join us." Thereupon he pulled out of his pocket a purse full of gold, ordered liquor, nuts, and gingerbread. All was ready in a trice, and he began treating the lads and lasses, giving each a share. Then he took to dancing. Why, it was a treat to look at him. Marussia struck his fancy more than anyone else, so he stuck close to her. The time came for going home. "Marussia," says he, "come and see me off." She went to see him off. "Marussia, sweetheart," says he, "would you like me to marry you?" "If you like to marry me, I will gladly marry you. But where do you come from?" "From such and such a place. I'm clerk at a merchant's." Then they bade each other farewell and separated. When Marussia got home, her mother asked her, "Well, daughter, have you enjoyed yourself?" "Yes, mother. But I've something pleasant to tell you besides. There was a lad there from the neighbourhood, good-looking and with lots of money, and he promised to marry me. Harkee, Marussia, when you go to where the girls are tomorrow, take a ball of thread with you, make a noose in it, and, when you are going to see him off, throw it over one of his buttons and quietly unroll the ball. Then, by means of the thread, you will be able to find out where he lives." Next day Marussia went to the gathering and took a ball of thread with her. The youth came again. "Good evening, Marussia," said he. "Good evening," said she. Games began and dances. Even more than before did he stick to Marussia. Not a step would he budge from her. The time came for going home. "Come and see me off, Marussia," says the stranger. She went out into the street, and while she was taking leave of him, she quietly dropped the noose over one of his buttons. He went his way, but she remained where she was, unrolling the ball. When she had unrolled the whole of it, she ran after the thread to find out where her betrothed lived. At first the thread followed the road. Then it stretched across hedges and ditches and led Marussia towards the church and right up to the porch. Marussia tried the door. It was locked. She went round the church, found a ladder, set it against a window, and climbed up it to see what was going on inside. Having got into the church, she looked and saw her betrothed standing beside a grave and devouring a dead body. For a corpse had been left for that night in the church. She wanted to get down the ladder quietly, but her fright prevented her from taking proper heed, and she made a little noise. Then she ran home almost beside herself, fancying all the time she was being pursued. She was all but dead before she got in. Next morning her mother asked her, "Well, Marussia, did you see the youth?" "I saw him, mother," she replied. But what else she had seen, she did not tell. In the morning Marussia was sitting, considering whether she would go to the gathering or not. "Go," said her mother, "amuse yourself while you're young." So she went to the gathering. The Fiend was there already. Games, fun, dancing began anew. The girls knew nothing of what had happened. When they began to separate and go homewards, "Come, Marussia," says the evil one, "see me off." She was afraid and didn't stir. Then all the other girls opened out upon her. "What are you thinking about? Have you grown so bashful, forsooth? Go and see the good lad off." There was no help for it. Out she went, not knowing what would come of it. As soon as they got into the streets, he began questioning her. "You were in the church last night?" "No." "And saw what I was doing there?" "No." "Very well. Tomorrow your father will die." Having said this, he disappeared. Marussia returned home grave and sad. When she woke up in the morning, her father lay dead. They wept and wailed over him and laid him in the coffin. In the evening, her mother went off to the priest's, but Marussia remained at home. At last she became afraid of being alone in the house. "Suppose I go to my friends," she thought. So she went and found the evil one there. "Good evening, Marussia. Why aren't you merry?" "How can I be merry? My father is dead." "Oh, poor thing." They all grieved for her. Even the accursed one himself grieved, just as if it hadn't all been his own doing. By and by they began saying farewell and going home. "Marussia," says he, "see me off." She didn't want to. "What are you thinking of, child?" insist the girls. "What are you afraid of? Go and see him off." So she went to see him off. They passed out into the street. "Tell me, Marussia," says he, "were you in the church?" "No." "Did you see what I was doing?" "No." "Very well. Tomorrow your mother will die." He spoke and disappeared. Marussia returned home sadder than ever. The night went by. Next morning, when she awoke, her mother lay dead. She cried all day long, but when the sun set and it grew dark around, Marussia became afraid of being left alone, so she went to her companions. "Why, whatever's the matter with you? You're clean out of countenance," say the girls. "How am I likely to be cheerful? Yesterday my father died, and today my mother. Poor thing, poor unhappy girl," they all exclaim sympathizingly. Well, the time came to say goodbye. "See me off, Marussia," says the fiend, so she went out to see him off. "Tell me, were you in the church?" "No." "And saw what I was doing?" "No." "Very well. Tomorrow evening you will die yourself." Marussia spent the night with her friends. In the morning she got up and considered what she should do. She bethought herself that she had a grandmother, an old, very old woman, who had become blind from length of years. "Suppose I go and ask her advice," she said, and then went off to her grandmother's. "Good day, Granny," says she. "Good day, granddaughter. What news is there with you? How are your father and mother?" "They are dead, Granny," replied the girl, and then told her all that had happened. The old woman listened and said, "Oh, dear me, my poor unhappy child. Go quickly to the priest and ask him this favor, that if you die, your body shall not be taken out of the house through the doorway, but that the ground shall be dug away from under the threshold, and that you shall be dragged out through that opening. And also beg that you may be buried at a crossway, at a spot where 4 roads meet." Marussia went to the priest, wept bitterly, and made him promise to do everything according to her grandmother's instructions. Then she returned home, bought a coffin, lay down in it, and straightway expired. Well, they told the priest, and he buried, first her father and mother, and then Marussia herself. Her body was passed underneath the threshold and buried at a crossway. Soon afterwards, a seigneur's son happened to drive past Marussia's grave. On that grave he saw growing a wondrous flower, such a one as he had never seen before. Said the young seigneur to his servant, "Go and pluck up that flower by the roots. We'll take it home and put it in a flower pot. Perhaps it will blossom there." Well, they dug up the flower, took it home, put it in a glazed flower pot, and set it in a window. The flower began to grow larger and more beautiful. One night the servant hadn't gone to sleep somehow, and he happened to be looking at the window, when he saw a wondrous thing take place. All of a sudden, the flower began to tremble. Then it fell from its stem to the ground and turned into a lovely maiden. The flower was beautiful, but the maiden was more beautiful still. She wandered from room to room, got herself various things to eat and drink, ate and drank, then stamped upon the ground and became a flower as before, mounted to the window, and resumed her place upon the stem. Next day the servant told the young seigneur of the wonders which he had seen during the night. "Ah, brother," said the youth, "why didn't you wake me? Tonight we'll both keep watch together." The night came, they slept not, but watched. Exactly at 12 o'clock the blossom began to shake, flew from place to place, and then fell to the ground. And the beautiful maiden appeared, got herself things to eat and drink, and sat down to supper. The young seigneur rushed forward and seized her by her white hands. Impossible was it for him sufficiently to look at her, to gaze on her beauty. Next morning he said to his father and mother, "Please allow me to get married. I've found myself a bride." His parents gave their consent. "As for Marussia," she said, "only on this condition will I marry you, that for 4 years I need not go to church." "Very good," said he. Well, they were married, and they lived together 1 year, 2 years, and had a son. But one day they had visitors at their house who enjoyed themselves and drank and began bragging about their wives. This one's wife was handsome, that one's was handsomer still. "You may say what you like," says the host, "but a handsomer wife than mine does not exist in the whole world." "Handsome, yes," reply the guests, "but a heathen." "How so?" "Why, she never goes to church." Her husband found these observations distasteful. He waited till Sunday, and then told his wife to get dressed for church. "I don't care what you may say," says he, "go and get ready directly." Well, they got ready and went to church. The husband went in, didn't see anything particular, but when she looked round, there was the Fiend sitting at a window. "Ha! Here you are at last," he cried. "Remember old times. Were you in the church that night?" "No." "And did you see what I was doing there?" "No." "Very well. Tomorrow both your husband and your son will die." Marussia rushed straight out of the church and away to her grandmother. The old woman gave her 2 phials, the one full of holy water, the other of the water of life, and told her what she was to do. Next day both Marussia's husband and her son died. Then the Fiend came flying to her and asked, "Tell me, were you in the church?" "I was." "And did you see what I was doing?" "You were eating a corpse." She spoke and splashed the holy water over him. In a moment he turned into mere dust and ashes, which blew to the winds. Afterwards she sprinkled her husband and her boy with the water of life. Straightway they revived. And from that time forward they knew neither sorrow nor separation, but they all lived together long and happily. Another lively sketch of a peasant's love-making is given in the introduction to the story of Ivan the widow's son and Grisha. The tale is one of magic and enchantment, of living clouds and 7-headed snakes, but the opening is a little piece of still life very quaintly portrayed. A certain villager named Trofim, having been unable to find a wife, his aunt Melania comes to his aid, promising to procure him an interview with a widow who has been left well provided for, and whose personal appearance is attractive, real blood and milk. When she's got on her holiday clothes, she's as fine as a peacock. Trofim grovels with gratitude at his aunt's feet. "My own dear auntie, Melania Prokhorovna, get me married for heaven's sake. I'll buy you an embroidered kerchief in return, the very best in the whole market." The widow comes to pay Melania a visit, and is induced to believe, on the evidence of beans, frequently used for the purpose of divination, that her destined husband is close at hand. At this propitious moment, Trophim appears. Melania makes a little speech to the young couple, ending her recommendation to get married with the words, "I can see well enough by the bridegroom's eyes that the bride is to his taste, only I don't know what the bride thinks about taking him." "I don't mind," says the widow. "Well then, glory be to God. Now stand up, we'll say a prayer before the holy pictures, then give each other a kiss, and go in heaven's name and get married at once." And so the question is settled. From a courtship and a marriage in peasant life, we may turn to a death and a burial. There are frequent allusions in the skazkas to these gloomy subjects, with reference to which we will quote two stories, the one pathetic, the other unintentionally grotesque. Neither of them bears any title in the original, but we may style the first. The Dead Mother. In a certain village there lived a husband and wife, lived happily, lovingly, peaceably. All their neighbours envied them. The sight of them gave pleasure to honest folks. Well, the mistress bore a son, but directly after it was born she died. The poor moujik moaned and wept. Above all, he was in despair about the babe. How was he to nourish it now? How to bring it up without its mother? He did what was best and hired an old woman to look after it. Only here was a wonder. All day long the babe would take no food and did nothing but cry. There was no soothing it anyhow. But during a great part of the night one could fancy it wasn't there at all, so silently and peacefully did it sleep. "What's the meaning of this?" thinks the old woman. "Suppose I keep awake tonight, maybe I shall find out." Well, just at midnight, she heard someone quietly open the door and go up to the cradle. The babe became still, just as if it was being suckled. The next night the same thing took place, and the third night too. Then she told the moujik about it. He called his kinsfolk together and held counsel with them. They determined on this, to keep awake on a certain night, and to spy out who it was that came to suckle the babe. So at eventide they all lay down on the floor, and beside them they set a lighted taper hidden in an earthen pot. At midnight the cottage door opened. Someone stepped up to the cradle. The babe became still. At that moment one of the kinsfolk suddenly brought out the light. They looked, and saw the dead mother in the very same clothes in which she had been buried, on her knees beside the cradle, over which she bent as she suckled the babe at her dead breast. The moment the light shone in the cottage, she stood up, gazed sadly on her little one, and then went out of the room without a sound, not saying a word to anyone. All those who saw her stood for a time terror-struck, and then they found the babe was dead. The second story will serve as an illustration of one of the Russian customs with respect to the dead, and also of the ideas about witchcraft, still prevalent in Russia. We may create for it the title of The Dead Witch. There was once an old woman who was a terrible witch, and she had a daughter and a granddaughter. The time came for the old crone to die. So she summoned her daughter and gave her these instructions. "Mind, daughter, when I'm dead, don't you wash my body with lukewarm water, but fill a cauldron. Make it boil its very hottest, and then with that boiling water regularly scald me all over." After saying this, the witch lay ill 2 or 3 days, and then died. The daughter ran round to all her neighbours, begging them to come and help her to wash the old woman, and meantime the little granddaughter was left all alone in the cottage, and this is what she saw there. All of a sudden there crept out from beneath the stove 2 demons, a big one and a tiny one, and they ran up to the dead witch. The old demon seized her by the feet and tore away at her so that he stripped off all her skin at one pull. Then he said to the little demon, "Take the flesh for yourself and lug it under the stove." So the little demon flung his arms round the carcass and dragged it under the stove. Nothing was left of the old woman but her skin. Into it the old demon inserted himself, and then he lay down just where the witch had been lying. Presently the daughter came back, bringing a dozen other women with her, and they all set to work laying out the corpse. "Mammy," says the child, "they've pulled Granny's skin off while you were away." "What do you mean by telling such lies?" "It's quite true, Mammy. There was ever such a blackie came from under the stove, and he pulled the skin off and got into it himself." "Hold your tongue, naughty child." "You're talking nonsense," cried the old crone's daughter. Then she fetched a big cauldron, filled it with cold water, put it on the stove, and heated it till it boiled furiously. Then the women lifted up the old crone, laid her in a trough, took hold of the cauldron, and poured the whole of the boiling water over her at once. The demon couldn't stand it. He leaped out of the trough, dashed through the doorway, and disappeared, skin and all. The women stared. "What marvel is this?" they cried. "Here was the dead woman, and now she isn't here. There's nobody left to lay out or to bury. The demons have carried her off before our very eyes." A Russian peasant funeral is preceded or accompanied by a considerable amount of wailing, which answers in some respect to the Irish keening. To the zaplachki, or laments, which are uttered on such occasions frequently by hired wailers who closely resemble the Corsican vociferators, the modern Greek myrologists' allusions are sometimes made in the skazkas. In the fox wailer, for example, one of the variants of the well-known Jack and the Beanstalk story. An old man puts his wife in a bag and attempts to carry her up the beanstalk to heaven. Becoming tired on the way, he drops the bag, and the old woman is killed. After weeping over her dead body, he sets out in search of a wailer. "Meeting a bear," he cries, "wail a bit, bear." "For my old woman, I'll give you a pair of nice white fowls." The bear growls out, "Oh, dear granny of mine, how I grieve for thee." "No, no," says the old man, "you can't wail." Going a little further, he tries a wolf, but the wolf succeeds no better than the bear. At last a fox comes by, and on being appealed to, begins to cry aloud, "Turu, turu, grandmother, grandfather has killed thee," a wail which pleases the widower so much that he hands over the fowls to the fox at once and asks, enraptured, for that strain again. One of the most curious of the stories which relate to a village burial, one in which also the feeling with which the Russian villagers sometimes regard their clergy finds expression, is that called the treasure. In a certain kingdom there lived an old couple in great poverty. Sooner or later the old woman died. It was in winter, in severe and frosty weather. The old man went round to his friends and neighbours, begging them to help him to dig a grave for the old woman, but his friends and neighbours, knowing his great poverty, all flatly refused. The old man went to the Pope, but in that village they had an awfully grasping Pope, one without any conscience, and says he, "Lend a hand, Reverend Father, to get my old woman buried. But have you got any money to pay for the funeral? If so, friend, pay up beforehand. It's no use hiding anything from you. Not a single kopeck have I at home. But if you'll wait a little, I'll earn some, and then I'll pay you with interest on my word. I'll pay you." The Pope wouldn't so much as listen to the old man. "If you haven't any money, don't you dare to come here," says he. "What's to be done?" thinks the old man. "I'll go to the graveyard, dig a grave as I best can, and bury the old woman myself." So he took an axe and a shovel and went to the graveyard. When he got there, he began to prepare a grave. He chopped away the frozen ground on the top with the axe, and then he took to the shovel. He dug, and at last he dug out a metal pot. Looking into it, he saw that it was stuffed full of ducats that shone like fire. The old man was immensely delighted, and cried, "Glory be to thee, O Lord! I shall have wherewithal both to bury my old woman, and to perform the rites of remembrance." He did not go on digging the grave any longer, but took the pot of gold and carried it home. Well, we all know what money will do. Everything went as smooth as oil. In a trice there were found good folks to dig the grave and fashion the coffin. The old man sent his daughter-in-law to purchase meat and drink and different kind of relishes. Everything there ought to be at memorial feasts. And he himself took a ducat in his hand and hobbled back again to the Pope's. The moment he reached the door, out flew the Pope at him. "You were distinctly told, you old lout, that you were not to come here without money, and now you've slunk back again." "Don't be angry, Batyushka," said the old man imploringly. "Here's gold for you. If you'll only bury my old woman, I'll never forget your kindness." The Pope took the money, and didn't know how best to receive the old man, where to seat him, with what words to smooth him down. "Well now, old friend, be of good cheer, everything shall be done," said he. The old man made his bow and went home, and the Pope and his wife began talking about him. "There now, the old hunks," they say. "So poor, forsooth, so poor. And yet he's paid a gold piece. Many a defunct person of quality have I buried in my time, but I never got so from anyone before." The Pope got under way with all his retinue and buried the old crone in proper style. After the funeral, the old man invited him to his house to take part in the feast in memory of the dead. Well, they entered the cottage and sat down to table, and there appeared from somewhere or other meat and drink and all sorts of snacks, everything in profusion. The reverend guest sat down, ate for 3 people, looked greedily at what was not his. The other guests finished their meal and separated to go to their homes. Then the Pope also rose from the table. The old man went to speed him on his way. As soon as they got into the farmyard, and the Pope saw they were alone at last, he began questioning the old man. "Listen, friend. Confess to me, don't leave so much as a single sin on your soul. It's just the same before me as before God. How have you managed to get on at such a pace? You used to be a poor moujik and now marry. Where did it come from? Confess, friend. Whose breath have you stopped? Whom have you pillaged? What are you talking about, Batyushka? I will tell you the exact truth. I have not robbed, nor plundered, nor killed anyone. A treasure tumbled into my hands of its own accord." And he told him how it all happened. When the Pope heard these words, he actually shook all over with greediness. Going home, he did nothing by night and by day but think, that such a wretched lout of a moujik should have come in for such a lump of money. Is there any way of tricking him now and getting this pot of money out of him? He told his wife about it, and he and she discussed the matter together, and held counsel over it. "Listen, mother," says he, "we've a goat, haven't we?" "Yes." "All right then, we'll wait until it's night, and then we'll do the job properly." Late in the evening, the Pope dragged the goat indoors, killed it, and took off its skin horns, beard, and all complete. Then he pulled the goat's skin over himself and said to his wife, "Bring a needle and thread, mother, and fasten up the skin all round so that it mayn't slip off." So she took a strong needle and some tough thread, and sewed him up in the goatskin. Well, at the dead of night, the Pope went straight to the old man's cottage, got under the window, and began knocking and scratching. The old man, hearing the noise, jumped up and asked, "Who's there?" "The devil. Ours is a holy spot. shrieked the moujik, and began crossing himself and uttering prayers. "Listen, old man," says the Pope. "From me thou wilt not escape, although thou mayst pray. Although thou mayst cross thyself, much better give me back my pot of money, otherwise I will make thee pay for it. See now, I pitied thee in thy misfortune, and I showed thee the treasure, thinking thou wouldst take a little of it to pay for the funeral, but thou hast pillaged it utterly." The old man looked out of window. The goat's horns and beard caught his eye. It was the devil himself, no doubt of it. "Let's get rid of him, money and all," thinks the old man. "I've lived before now without money, and now I'll go on living without it." So he took the pot of gold, carried it outside, flung it on the ground, and bolted indoors again as quickly as possible. The Pope seized the pot of money and hastened home. When he got back, "Come," says he. "The money is in our hands now. Here, mother, put it well out of sight and take a sharp knife, cut the thread, and pull the goatskin off me before anyone sees it." She took a knife and was beginning to cut the thread at the seam when forth flowed blood, and the Pope began to howl. "Oh, it hurts, mother, it hurts! Don't cut, mother, don't cut!" She began ripping the skin open in another place, but with just the same result. The goatskin had united with his body all round, and all that they tried, and all that they did, even to taking the money back to the old man, was of no avail. The goatskin remained clinging tight to the Pope all the same. God evidently did it to punish him for his great greediness. A somewhat less heathenish story with regard to money is the following, which may be taken as a specimen of the skazkas, which bear the impress of the genuine reverence which the peasants feel for their religion, whatever may be the feelings they entertain towards its ministers. While alluding to this subject, by the way, it may be as well to remark that no great reliance can be placed upon the evidence contained in the folk tales of any land, with respect to the relations between its clergy and their flocks. The local parson of folklore is, as a general rule, merely the innocent inheritor of the bad reputation acquired by some ecclesiastic of another age and clime. The Cross Surety. Once upon a time, two merchants lived in a certain town just on the verge of a stream. One of them was a Russian, the other a Tartar. Both were rich. But the Russian got so utterly ruined by some business or other that he hadn't a single bit of property left. Everything he had was confiscated or stolen. The Russian merchant had nothing to turn to. He was left as poor as a rat. So he went to his friend the Tartar and besought him to lend him some money. "Get me a surety," says the Tartar. "But whom can I get for you, seeing that I haven't a soul belonging to me? Stay, though, there's a surety for you, the life-giving cross on the church." "Very good, my friend," says the Tartar. "I'll trust your cross, your faith, or ours. It's all one to me." And he gave the Russian merchant 50,000 rubles. The Russian took the money, bade the Tartar farewell, and went back to trade in divers places. By the end of 2 years he had gained 150,000 rubles by the 50,000 he had borrowed. Now he happened to be sailing one day along the Danube, going with wares from one place to another, when all of a sudden a storm arose, and was on the point of sinking the ship he was in. Then the merchant remembered how he had borrowed money, and given the life-giving cross as a surety, but had not paid his debt. That was doubtless the cause of the storm arising. No sooner had he said this to himself than the storm began to subside. The merchant took a barrel, counted out 50,000 rubles, wrote the Tartar a note, placed it, together with the money, in the barrel, and then flung the barrel into the water, saying to himself, "As I gave the cross as my surety to the Tartar, the money will be certain to reach him." The barrel straightway sank to the bottom. Everyone supposed the money was lost. But what happened? In the Tartar's house there lived a Russian kitchen maid. One day she happened to go to the river for water, and when she got there she saw a barrel floating along. So she went a little way into the water and began trying to get hold of it. But it wasn't to be done. When she made at the barrel, it retreated from her. When she turned from the barrel to the shore, it floated after her. She went on trying and trying for some time. Then she went home and told her master all that had happened. At first he wouldn't believe her, but at last he determined to go to the river and see for himself what sort of barrel it was that was floating there. When he got there, sure enough, there was the barrel floating, and not far from the shore. The Tartar took off his clothes and went into the water. Before he had gone any distance, the barrel came floating up to him of its own accord. He laid hold of it, carried it home, opened it, and looked inside. There he saw a quantity of money, and on top of the money a note. He took out the note and read it, and this is what was said in it, dear friend. I return to you the 50,000 roubles for which, when I borrowed them from you, I gave the life-giving cross as a surety. The Tartar read these words and was astounded at the power of the life-giving cross. He counted the money over to see whether the full sum was really there. It was there, exactly. Meanwhile, the Russian merchant, after trading some 5 years, made a tolerable fortune. Well, he returned to his old home, and, thinking that his barrel had been lost, he considered it his first duty to settle with the Tartar. So he went to his house and offered him the money he had borrowed. Then the Tartar told him all that had happened, and how he had found the barrel in the river with the money and the note inside it. Then he showed him the note, saying, "Is that really your hand?" "It certainly is," replied the other. Everyone was astounded at this wondrous manifestation, and the Tartar said, "Then I've no more money to receive from you, brother. Take that back again." The Russian merchant had a service performed as a thank-offering to God, and next day the Tartar was baptized with all his household. The Russian merchant was his godfather, and the kitchen maid his godmother. After that they both lived long and happily, survived to a great age, and then died peacefully. There is one marked feature in the Russian peasant's character to which the skazkas frequently refer: his passion for drink. To him, strong liquor is a friend, a comforter, a solace amid the ills of life. Intoxication is not so much an evil to be dreaded or remembered with shame, as a joy to be fondly anticipated, or classed with the happy memories of the past. By him, drunkenness is regarded, like sleep, as the friend of woe, and a friend whose services can be even more readily commanded. On certain occasions he almost believes that to get drunk is a duty he owes either to the church or to the memory of the dead. At times, without the slightest apparent cause, he is seized by a sudden and irresistible craving for ardent spirits, and he commences a drinking bout which lasts with intervals of coma for days, or even weeks, after which he resumes his everyday life and his usual sobriety as calmly as if no interruption had taken place. All these ideas and habits of his find expression in his popular tales, giving rise to incidents which are often singularly out of keeping with the rest of the narrative in which they occur. In one of the many variants, for instance, of a widespread and well-known story, that of the 3 princesses who are rescued from captivity by a hero from whom they are afterwards carried away, and who refuse to get married until certain clothes or shoes or other things impossible for ordinary workmen to make are supplied to them. An unfortunate shoemaker is told that if he does not next day produce the necessary shoes of perfect fit, although no measure has been taken, and all set thick with precious stones, he shall be hanged. Away he goes at once to a traktir, or tavern, and sets to work to drown his grief in drink. After a while he begins to totter. "Now then," he says, "I'll take home a bicker of spirits with me and go to bed. And tomorrow morning, as soon as they come to fetch me to be hanged, I'll toss off half the bickerful. They may hang me then without my knowing anything about it." In the story of the purchased wife, the Princess Anastasia, the Beautiful, enables the youth Ivan, who ransoms her, to win a large sum of money in the following manner. Having worked a piece of embroidery, she tells him to take it to market. "But if anyone purchases it," says she, "don't take any money from him, but ask him to give you liquor enough to make you drunk." Ivan obeys, and this is the result. He drank till he was intoxicated, and when he left the kabak, or pothouse, he tumbled into a muddy pool. The crowd collected, and folks looked at him and said scoffingly, "Oh, the fair youth! Now'd be the time for him to go to church to get married. Fair or foul," says he, "if I bid her, Anastasia the Beautiful will kiss the crown of my head." "Don't go bragging like that," says a rich merchant. "Why, she wouldn't even so much as look at you," and offers to stake all that he is worth on the truth of his assertion. Ivan accepts the wager. The princess appears, takes him by the hand, kisses him on the crown of his head, wipes the dirt off him, and leads him home. Still inebriated, but no longer impecunious. Sometimes even greater people than the peasants get drunk. The story of Semiletka, a variant of the well-known tale of how a woman's wit enables her to guess all riddles, to detect all deceits, and to conquer all difficulties, relates how the heroine was chosen by a voivode as his wife, with the stipulation that if she meddled in the affairs of his voivodeship, she was to be sent back to her father, but allowed to take with her whatever thing belonging to her she prized most. The marriage takes place, but one day the well-known case comes before him for decision of the foal of the borrowed mare. Does it belong to the owner of the mare, or to the borrower in whose possession it was at the time of foaling? The voivode adjudges it to the borrower, and this is how the story ends. Semiletka heard of this and could not restrain herself, but said that he had decided unfairly. The voivode waxed wroth and demanded a divorce. After dinner, Semiletka was obliged to go back to her father's house, but during the dinner she made the voivode drink till he was intoxicated. He drank his fill and went to sleep. While he was sleeping, she had him placed in a carriage, and then she drove away with him to her father's. When they had arrived there, the voivode awoke and said, "Who brought me here?" "I brought you," said Semiletka. "There was an agreement between us that I might take away with me whatever I prized most, and so I have taken you." The voivode marveled at her wisdom and made peace with her. He and she then returned home and went on living prosperously. But although drunkenness is very tenderly treated in the skazkas, as well as in the folk songs, it forms the subject of many a moral lesson, couched in terms of the utmost severity, in the stiki, or poems of a religious character, sung by the blind beggars and other wandering minstrels who sing in front of churches, and also in the legends, which are tales of a semi-religious, or rather demi-semi-religious, nature. No better specimen of the stories of this class referring to drunkenness can be offered than the history of the Awful Drunkard. Once there was an old man who was such an awful drunkard as passes all description. Well, one day he went to a kabak, intoxicated himself with liquor, and then went staggering home, blind drunk. Now his way happened to lie across a river. When he came to the river, he didn't stop long to consider, but kicked off his boots, hung them round his neck, and walked into the water. Scarcely had he got halfway across when he tripped over a stone, tumbled into the water, and there was an end of him. Now he left a son called Petrusha. When Peter saw that his father had disappeared and left no trace behind, he took the matter greatly to heart for a time. He wept for a while. He had a service performed for the repose of his father's soul, and he began to act as head of the family. One Sunday he went to church to pray to God. As he passed along the road, a woman was pounding away in front of him. She walked and walked, stumbled over a stone, and began swearing at it, saying, "What devil shoved you under my feet?" Hearing these words, Petrusha said, "Good day, aunt. Whither away?" "To church, my dear, to pray to God." "But isn't this sinful conduct of yours? You're going to church to pray to God, and yet you think about the evil one. Your foot stumbles and you throw the fault on the devil." Well, he went to church and then returned home. He walked and walked, and suddenly, goodness knows whence, there appeared before him a fine-looking man who saluted him and said, "Thanks, Petrusha, for your good word. Who are you, and why do you thank me?" asks Petrusha. "I am the devil. I thank you because when that woman stumbled and scolded me without a cause, you said a good word for me." Then he began to entreat him, saying, "Come and pay me a visit, Petrusha. How I will reward you, to be sure. With silver and with gold, with everything will I endow you." "Very good," says Petrusha, "I'll come." Having told him all about the road he was to take, the devil straightway disappeared, and Petrusha returned home. Next day, Petrusha set off on his visit to the devil. He walked and walked. For 3 whole days did he walk, and then he reached a great forest, dark and dense, impossible even to see the sky from within it. And in that forest there stood a rich palace. Well, he entered the palace, and a fair maiden caught sight of him. She had been stolen from a certain village by the evil spirit, and when she caught sight of him she cried, "Whatever have you come here for, good youth? Here devils abide. They will tear you to pieces." Petrusha told her how and why he had made his appearance in that palace. "Well now, mind this," says the fair maiden. "The devil will begin giving you silver and gold. Don't take any of it, but ask him to give you the very wretched horse which the evil spirits use for fetching wood and water. That horse is your father. When he came out of the kabak drunk and fell into the water, the devils immediately seized him and made him their hack, and now they use him for fetching wood and water." Presently there appeared the gallant who had invited Petrusha, and began to regale him with all kinds of meat and drink. And when the time came for Petrusha to be going homewards, "Come," said the devil, "I will provide you with money and with a capital horse, so that you will speedily get home." "I don't want anything," replied Petrusha. "Only, if you wish to make me a present, give me that sorry jade which you use for carrying wood and water." "What good will that be to you? If you ride it home quickly, I expect it will die. No matter, let me have it. I won't take any other." So the devil gave him that sorry jade. Petrusha took it by the bridle and led it away. As soon as he reached the gates, there appeared the fair maiden and asked, "Have you got the horse?" "I have." "Well then, good youth, when you get nigh to your village, take off your cross, trace a circle 3 times about this horse, and hang the cross round its neck." Petrusha took leave of her and went his way. When he came nigh to his village, he did everything exactly as the maiden had instructed him. He took off his copper cross, traced a circle 3 times about the horse, and hung the cross round its neck. And immediately the horse was no longer there, but in its place there stood before Petrusha his own father. The son looked upon the father, burst into tears and led him to his cottage, and for 3 days the old man remained without speaking, unable to make use of his tongue. And after that they lived happily and in all prosperity. The old man entirely gave up drinking, and to his very last day never took so much as a single drop of spirits. The Russian peasant is by no means deficient in humor, a fact of which the skazkas offer abundant evidence. But it is not easy to find stories which can be quoted at full length as illustrations of that humor. The jokes which form the themes of the Russian facetious tales are for the most part common to all Europe, and a similar assertion may be made with regard to the stories of most lands. An unfamiliar joke is but rarely to be discovered in the lower strata of fiction. He who has read the folk tales of one country only is apt to attribute to its inhabitants a comic originality to which they can lay no claim, and so a Russian who knows the stories of his own land, but has not studied those of other countries, is very liable to credit the skazkas with the undivided possession of a number of merry jests, in which they can claim but a very small share. Jests which in reality form the stock in trade of rustic wags among the vineyards of France or Germany, or on the hills of Greece, or beside the fjords of Norway, or along the coasts of Brittany or Argyleshire, which for centuries have set beards wagging in Cairo and Ispahan, and in the cool of the evening hour have cheered the heart of the villager, weary with his day's toil under the burning sun of India. It is only when the joke hinges upon something which is peculiar to a people that it is likely to be found among that people only. But most of the Russian jests turn upon pivots which are familiar to all the world, and have for their themes such commonplace topics as the incorrigible folly of man, the inflexible obstinacy of woman. And in their treatments of these subjects they offer very few novel features. It is strange how far a story of this kind may travel, and yet how little alteration it may undergo. Take, for instance, the skits against women which are so universally popular. Far away in outlying districts of Russia, we find the same time-honored quips which have so long figured in collections of English facetiae. There is the good old story, for instance, of the dispute between a husband and wife as to whether a certain rope has been cut with a knife or with scissors, resulting in the murder of the scissors upholding wife, who is pitched into the river by her knife advocating husband, but not before she has, in her very death agony, testified to her belief in the scissors hypothesis by a movement of her fingers above the surface of the stream. In a Russian form of the story, told in the government of Astrakhan, the quarrel is about the husband's beard. He says he has shaved it. His wife declares he has only cut it off. He flings her into a deep pool and calls to her to say, "Shaved." Utterance is impossible to her, but she lifts one hand above the water and by means of 2 fingers makes signs to show that it was cut. The story has even settled into a proverb. Of a contradictory woman, the Russian peasants affirm that, if you say shaved, she'll say cut. In the same way, another story shows us in Russian garb our old friend the widower, who, when looking for his drowned wife, a woman of a very antagonistic disposition, went up the river instead of down, saying to his astonished companions, "She always did everything contrariwise, so now, no doubt, she's gone against the stream." A common story again is that of the husband who, having confided a secret to his wife, which he justly fears she will reveal, throws discredit on her evidence about things in general by making her believe various absurd stories which she hastens to repeat. The final paragraph of one of the variants of this time-honored jest is quaint, concluding as it does by way of sting with a highly popular Russian saw. The wife has gone to the seigneur of the village and accused her husband of having found a treasure and kept it for his own use. The charge is true, but the wife is induced to talk such nonsense, and the husband complained so bitterly of her that the seigneur pitied the mujik for being so unfortunate. So he set him at liberty, and he had him divorced from his wife and married to another, a young and good-looking one. Then the mujik immediately dug up his treasure and began living in the best manner possible. Sure enough, the proverb doesn't say without reason, women have long hair and short wits. There is another story of this class which is worthy of being mentioned, as it illustrates a custom in which the Russians differ from some other peoples. A certain man had married a wife who was so capricious that there was no living with her. After trying all sorts of devices, her dejected husband at last asked her how she had been brought up, and learnt that she had received an education almost entirely German and French. With scarcely any Russian in it, she had not even been wrapped in swaddling clothes when a baby, nor swung in a luluka. Thereupon her husband determined to remedy the shortcomings of her early education, and whenever she showed herself capricious or took to squalling, he immediately had her swaddled and placed in a liulka and began swinging her to and fro. By the end of a half-year she became quite silky. All her caprices had been swung out of her, but instead of giving mere extracts from any more of the numerous stories to which the fruitful subject of woman's caprice has given rise, we will quote a couple of such tales at length. The first is the Russian variant of a story which has a long family tree, with ramifications extending over a great part of the world. Dr. Benfey has devoted to it no less than 16 pages of his introduction to the Panchatantra, tracing it from its original Indian home and its subsequent abode in Persia into almost every European land. The bad wife. "Peasant," cries the demon, "wherever can I take refuge? Run back into the pit, she won't go there any more." The demon went back to the pit and to the bad wife too. In return for his services, the boyar conferred a rich guerdon on the peasant, giving him his daughter to wife and presenting him with half his property. But the bad wife sits to this day in the pit in Tartarus. Our final illustration of the skazkas which satirize women is the story of the Golovika. It is all the more valuable, inasmuch as it is one of the few folk tales which throw any light on the working of Russian communal institutions. The word Golovika means, in its strict sense, the wife of a Golova, or elected chief Golova, head of a volost, or association of village communities, but here it is used for a female Golova, a species of mayoress. The Golovika. A certain woman was very bumptious. Her husband came from a village council one day, and she asked him, "What have you been deciding over there?" "What have we been deciding? Why, choosing a Golova." "Whom have you chosen?" "No one as yet." "Choose me," says the woman. So, as soon as her husband went back to the council, she was a bad sort, he wanted to give her a lesson. He told the elders what she had said. They immediately chose her as Golova. Well, the woman got along, settled all questions, took bribes, and drank spirits at the peasant's expense. But the time came to collect the poll tax. The Golova couldn't do it, wasn't able to collect it in time. There came a Cossack and asked for the Golova, but the woman had hidden herself. As soon as she learned that the Cossack had come, off she ran home. "Where, oh, where can I hide myself?" she cries to her husband. "Husband, dear, tie me up in a bag and put me out there where the corn sacks are." Now, there were 5 sacks of seed corn outside, so her husband tied up the Golova and set her in the midst of them. Up came the Cossack and said, "Ho, so the Golova's in hiding." Then he took to slashing at the sacks one after another with his whip, and the woman to howling at the pitch of her voice. "Oh, my father, I won't be a Golova. I won't be a golova." At last the Cossack left off beating the sacks and rode away. But the woman had had enough of golovaing. From that time forward she took to obeying her husband. Before passing on to another subject, it may be advisable to quote one of the stories in which the value of a good and wise wife is fully acknowledged. I have chosen for that purpose one of the variants of a tale from which, in all probability, our own story of Whittington and his cat has been derived. With respect to its origin, there can be very little doubt, such a feature as that of the incense burning, pointing directly to a Buddhist source. It is called the Three Copecks. There once was a poor little orphan lad who had nothing at all to live on, so he went to a rich moujik and hired himself out to him, agreeing to work for 1 kopeck a year. And when he had worked for a whole year and had received his kopeck, he went to a well and threw it into the water, saying, "If it don't sink, I'll keep it. It will be plain enough I've served my master faithfully." But the kopeck sank. Well, he remained in service a second year and received a second kopeck. Again he flung it into the well, and again it sank to the bottom. He remained a third year, worked and worked, till the time came for payment. Then his master gave him a rouble. "No," says the orphan, "I don't want your money. Give me my kopeck." He got his kopeck and flung it into the well. Lo and behold! There were all 3 kopecks floating on the surface of the water. So he took them and went into the town. Now, as he went along the street, it happened that some small boys had got hold of a kitten and were tormenting it, and he felt sorry for it and said, "Let me have that kitten, my boys." "Yes, we'll sell it you. What do you want for it?" 3 kopecks. Well, the orphan bought the kitten and afterwards hired himself to a merchant to sit in his shop. That merchant's business began to prosper wonderfully. He couldn't supply goods fast enough. Purchasers carried off everything in a twinkling. The merchant got ready to go to sea, freighted a ship, and said to the orphan, "Give me your cat. Maybe it will catch mice on board and amuse me." "Pray take it, master. Only if you lose it, I shan't let you off cheap." The merchant arrived in a far-off land and put up at an inn. The landlord saw that he had a great deal of money, so he gave him a bedroom which was infested by countless swarms of rats and mice, saying to himself, "If they should happen to eat him up, his money will belong to me." For in that country they knew nothing about cats, and the rats and mice had completely got the upper hand. Well, the merchant took the cat with him to his room and went to bed. Next morning the landlord came into the room. There was the merchant alive and well, holding the cat in his arms and stroking its fur. The cat was purring away, singing its song, and on the floor lay a perfect heap of dead rats and mice. "Master merchant, sell me that beastie," says the landlord. "Certainly. What do you want for it?" "A mere trifle. I'll make the beastie stand on his hind legs, while I hold him up by his forelegs, and you shall pile gold pieces around him. So, as just to hide him, I shall be content with that." The landlord agreed to the bargain. The merchant gave him the cat, received a sackful of gold, and as soon as he had settled his affairs, started on his way back. As he sailed across the seas, he thought, "Why should I give the gold to that orphan? Such a lot of money in return for a mere cat. That would be too much of a good thing. No, much better keep it myself." The moment he had made up his mind to the sin, all of a sudden there arose a storm. Such a tremendous one. The ship was on the point of sinking. "Ah, accursed one that I am! I've been longing for what doesn't belong to me, O Lord. Forgive me, a sinner. I won't keep back a single kopeck." The moment the merchant began praying, the winds were stilled, the sea became calm, and the ship went sailing on prosperously to the quay. "Hail, master," says the orphan. "But where's my cat?" "I've sold it," answers the merchant. "There's your money, take it in full." The orphan received the sack of gold, took leave of the merchant, and went to the strand where the shipmen were. From them he obtained a shipload of incense in exchange for his gold, and he strewed the incense along the strand, and burnt it in honor of God. The sweet savour spread through all that land, and suddenly an old man appeared, and he said to the orphan, "Which desirest thou, riches, or a good wife?" "I know not, old man." "Well then, go afield. 3 brothers are ploughing over there. Ask them to tell thee." The orphan went afield. He looked, and saw peasants tilling the soil. "God lend you aid," says he. "Thanks, good man," say they. "What dost thou want?" "An old man has sent me here, and told me to ask you which of the 2 I shall wish for, riches or a good wife." "Ask our elder brother, he's sitting in that cart there." The orphan went to the cart, and saw a little boy, one that seemed about 3 years old. "Can this be their elder brother?" Thought he, however, he asked him, "Which dost thou tell me to choose, riches or a good wife? Choose the good wife." So the orphan returned to the old man. "I'm told to ask for the wife," says he. "That's all right," said the old man, and disappeared from sight. The orphan looked round. By his side stood a beautiful woman. "Hail, good youth," says she. "I am thy wife. Let us go and seek a place where we may live." One of the sins to which the popular tale shows itself most hostile is that of avarice. The folk tales of all lands delight to gird at misers and skinflints, to place them in unpleasant positions, and to gloat over the sufferings which attend their death and embitter their ghostly existence. As a specimen of the manner in which the humour of the Russian peasant has manipulated the stories of this class, most of which probably reached him from the East, we may take the following tale of The Miser. There once was a rich merchant named Marco. A stingier fellow never lived. One day he went out for a stroll. As he went along the road he saw a beggar, an old man who sat there asking for alms. "Please to give, O ye Orthodox, for Christ's sake." Marco the rich passed by. Just at that time there came up behind him a poor moujik who felt sorry for the beggar and gave him a kopeck. The rich man seemed to feel ashamed, for he stopped and said to the moujik, "Harkee, neighbour, lend me a kopeck. I want to give that poor man something, but I've no small change." The moujik gave him one and asked when he should come for his money. "Come tomorrow," was the reply. Well, next day the poor man went to the rich man's to get his kopeck. He entered his spacious courtyard and asked, "Is Marco the rich at home?" "Yes. What do you want?" replied Marco. "I've come for my kopeck." "Ah, brother, come again. Really, I've no change just now." The poor man made his bow and went away. "I'll come tomorrow," said he. On the morrow he came again, but it was just the same story as before. "I haven't a single copper. If you like to change me a note for 100? No? Well, then come again in a fortnight." At the end of the fortnight, the poor man came again, but Marco the rich saw him from the window and said to his wife, "Harkee, wife, I'll strip myself naked and lie down under the holy pictures. Cover me up with a cloth and sit down and cry, just as you would over a corpse. When the moujik comes for his money, tell him I died this morning." Well, the wife did everything exactly as her husband directed her. While she was sitting there drowned in bitter tears, the moujik came into the room. "What do you want?" says she. "The money Marco the rich owes me," answers the poor man. "Ah, moujik, Marco the rich has wished us farewell. He's only just dead." "The kingdom of heaven be his. If you'll allow me, mistress, in return for my kopeck, I'll do him a last service. Just give his mortal remains a wash." So saying, he laid hold of a pot full of boiling water and began pouring its scalding contents over Marko the Rich. Marko, his brows knit, his legs contorted, was scarcely able to hold out. "Writhe away or not as you please," thought the poor man, "but pay me my kopeck." When he had washed the body and laid it out properly, he said, "Now then, mistress, buy a coffin and have it taken into the church. I'll go and read psalms over it." So Marko the Rich was put in a coffin and taken into the church, and the moujik began reading psalms over him. The darkness of night came on. All of a sudden a window opened, and a party of robbers crept through it into the church. The moujik hid himself behind the altar. As soon as the robbers had come in, they began dividing their booty, and after everything else was shared, there remained over and above a golden sabre. Each one laid hold of it for himself. No one would give up his claim to it. Out jumped the poor man, crying, "What's the good of disputing that way? Let the sabre belong to him who will cut this corpse's head off." Up jumped Marko the Rich like a madman. The robbers were frightened out of their wits, flung away their spoil, and scampered off. "Here, moujik," says Marko, "let's divide the money." They divided it equally between them. Each of the shares was a large one. "But how about the kopeck?" asks the poor man. "Ah, brother," replies Marko, "surely you can see I've got no change." And so Marko the Rich never paid the kopeck after all. We may take next the large class of stories about simpletons, so dear to the public in all parts of the world. In the skazkas, a simpleton is known as a durak, a word which admits of a variety of explanations. Sometimes it means an idiot, sometimes a fool, in the sense of a jester. In the stories of village life, its signification is generally that of a ninny in the fairy stories. It is frequently applied to the youngest of the well-known three brothers, the boots of the family, as Dr. Dasent has called him. In the latter case, of course, the hero's durashestvo, or foolishness, is purely subjective. It exists only in the false conceptions of his character, which his family or his neighbours have formed. But the durak of the following tale is represented as being really daft. The story begins with one of the conventional openings of the skazka. In a certain zarstvo, in a certain gosudarstvo. But the two synonyms for kingdom or state are used only because they rhyme. The Fool and the Birch-Tree. In a certain country there once lived an old man who had 3 sons. 2 of them had their wits about them, but the third was a fool. The old man died, and his sons divided his property among themselves by lot. The sharp-witted ones got plenty of all sorts of good things, but nothing fell to the share of the simpleton but 1 ox, and that such a skinny one. Well, fair time came round, and the clever brothers got ready to go and transact business. The simpleton saw this and said, "I'll go too, brothers, and take my ox for sale." So he fastened a cord to the horn of the ox and drove it to the town. On his way he happened to pass through a forest, and in the forest there stood an old withered birch-tree. Whenever the wind blew, the birch-tree creaked. "What is the birch creaking about?" thinks the simpleton. "Surely it must be bargaining for my ox." "Well," says he, "if you want to buy it, why buy it? I'm not against selling it. The price of the ox is 20 roubles. I can't take less. Out with the money." The birch made no reply, only went on creaking, but the simpleton fancied that it was asking for the ox on credit. "Very good," says he, "I'll wait till tomorrow." He tied the ox to the birch, took leave of the tree and went home. Presently in came the clever brothers and began questioning him. "Well, simpleton, sold your ox?" "I've sold it." "For how much?" "For 20 roubles." "Where's the money?" "I haven't received the money yet. It was settled. I should go for it tomorrow." "There's simplicity for you," say they. Early next morning the simpleton got up, dressed himself, and went to the birch-tree for his money. He reached the wood. There stood the birch, waving in the wind, but the ox was not to be seen. During the night the wolves had eaten it. "Now then, neighbour," he exclaimed, "pay me my money. You promised you'd pay me today." The wind blew, the birch creaked, and the simpleton cried, "What a liar you are! Yesterday you kept saying, 'I'll pay you tomorrow,' and now you make just the same promise." "Well, so be it. I'll wait 1 day more, but not a bit longer. I want the money myself." When he returned home, his brothers again questioned him closely. "Have you got your money?" "No, brothers. I've got to wait for my money again." "Whom have you sold it to?" "To the withered birch-tree in the forest." "Oh, what an idiot!" On the 3rd day, the simpleton took his hatchet and went to the forest. Arriving there, he demanded his money, but the birch-tree only creaked and creaked. "No, no, neighbour," says he. "If you're always going to treat me to promises, there'll be no getting anything out of you. I don't like such joking. I'll pay you out well for it." With that, he pitched into it with his hatchet, so that its chips flew about in all directions. Now, in that birch-tree there was a hollow, and in that hollow some robbers had hidden a pot full of gold. The tree split asunder, and the simpleton caught sight of the gold. He took as much of it as the skirts of his caftan would hold, and toiled home with it. There he showed his brothers what he had brought. "Where did you get such a lot, simpleton?" said they. "A neighbour gave it me for my ox. But this isn't anything like the whole of it. A good half of it I didn't bring home with me. Come along, brothers, let's get the rest." Well, they went into the forest, secured the money, and carried it home. "Now mind, simpleton," say the sensible brothers, "don't tell anyone that we've such a lot of gold." "Never fear, I won't tell a soul." All of a sudden they run up against a diachok, and says he, "What's that, brothers, you're bringing from the forest?" The sharp ones replied, "Mushrooms." But the simpleton contradicted them, saying, "They're telling lies. We're carrying money here. Just take a look at it." The diachok uttered such an "Oh!" Then he flung himself on the gold, and began seizing handfuls of it and stuffing them into his pocket. The simpleton grew angry, dealt him a blow with his hatchet, and struck him dead. "Hi, simpleton! What have you been and done?" cried his brothers. "You're a lost man, and you'll be the cause of our destruction too. Wherever shall we put the dead body?" They thought, and at last they dragged it to an empty cellar and flung it in there. But later on in the evening, the eldest brother said to the second one, "This piece of work is sure to turn out badly. When they begin looking for the diachok, you'll see that simpleton will tell them everything. Let's kill a goat and bury it in the cellar and hide the body of the dead man in some other place." Well, they waited till the dead of night. Then they killed a goat and flung it into the cellar. But they carried the diachok to another place and there hid him in the ground. Several days passed, and then people began looking everywhere for the diachok, asking everyone about him. "What do you want him for?" said the simpleton when he was asked. "I killed him some time ago with my hatchet, and my brothers carried him into the cellar." Straightway they laid hands on the simpleton, crying, "Take us there and show him to us." The simpleton went down into the cellar, got hold of the goat's head, and asked, "Was your diachok dark-haired?" "He was." "And had he a beard?" "Yes, he'd a beard." "And horns? What horns are you talking about, simpleton?" "Well, see for yourselves," said he, tossing up the head to them. They looked, saw it was a goat's, spat in the simpleton's face, and went their ways home. One of the most popular simpleton tales in the world is that of the fond parents who harrow their feelings by conjuring up the misfortunes which may possibly await their as yet unborn grandchildren. In Scotland it is told, in a slightly different form, of two old maids who were once found bathed in tears, and who were obliged to confess that they had been daydreaming and supposing if they had been married, and one had had a boy and the other a girl, and if the children, when they grew up, had married and had had a little child, and if it had tumbled out of the window and been killed, what a dreadful thing it would have been. At which terrible idea they both gave way to not unnatural tears. In one of its Russian forms, it is told of the old parents of a boy named Lutonia, who weep over the hypothetical death of an imaginary grandchild, thinking how sad it would have been if a log which the old woman has dropped had killed that as yet merely potential infant. The parent's grief appears to Lutonia so uncalled for that he leaves home, declaring that he will not return until he has found people more foolish than they. He travels long and far, and witnesses several foolish doings, most of which are familiar to us. In one place, a cow is being hoisted onto a roof in order that it may eat the grass growing thereon. In another, a horse is being inserted into its collar by sheer force. In a third, a woman is fetching milk from the cellar, a spoonful at a time. But the story comes to an end before its hero has discovered the surpassing stupidity of which he is in quest. In another Russian story of a similar nature, Lutonia goes from home in search of someone more foolish than his mother, who has been tricked by a cunning sharper. First, he finds carpenters attempting to stretch a beam which is not long enough, and earns their gratitude by showing them how to add a piece to it. Then he comes to a place where sickles are unknown, and harvesters are in the habit of biting off the ears of corn. So he makes a sickle for them, thrusts it into a sheaf, and leaves it there. They take it for a monstrous worm, tie a cord to it, and drag it away to the bank of the river. There they fasten one of their number to a log and set him afloat, giving him the end of the cord in order that he may drag the worm after him into the water. The log turns over, and the moujik with it, so that his head is under water while his legs appear above it. "Why, brother?" they call to him from the bank. "Why are you so particular about your leggings? If they do get wet, you can dry them at the fire." But he makes no reply, only drowns. Finally, Lutonia meets the counterpart of the well-known Irishman, who, when counting the party to which he belongs, always forgets to count himself, and so gets into numerical difficulties, after which he returns home. It would be easy to multiply examples of this style of humour to find in the folk tales current all over Russia, the equivalents of our own facetious narratives about the wise. Men of Gotham. The old woman whose petticoats were cut short by the peddler whose name was Stout, and a number of other inhabitants of Fool Land, to whom the heart of childhood is still closely attached, and also of the exaggeration stories, the German Lügenmärchen, on which was founded the narrative of Baron Munchausen's surprising adventures. But instead of doing this, before passing on to the more important groups of the skazkas, I will quote, as this chapter's final illustrations of the Russian storyteller's art, an animal story and a legend. Here is the former. The Mizgir. In the olden years, long, long ago, with the springtide fair and the summer's heat, there came on the world distress and shame. For gnats and flies began to swarm, biting folks and letting their warm blood flow. Then the spider appeared, the hero bold, who, with waving arms, weaved webs around the highways and byways in which the gnats and flies were most to be found. A ghastly gadfly, coming that way, stumbled straight into the spider's snare. The spider, tightly squeezing her throat, prepared to put her out of the world. From the spider, the gadfly mercy sought. "Good Father Spider, please not to kill me. I've ever so many little ones. Without me they'll be orphans left, and from door to door have to beg their bread and squabble with dogs." Well, the spider released her. Away she flew, and everywhere humming and buzzing about, told the flies and gnats of what had occurred. "Oh, ye gnats and flies, meet here beneath this ash tree's roots. A spider has come, and, with waving of arms and weaving of nets, has set his snares in all the ways to which the flies and gnats resort. He'll catch them, every single one." They flew to the spot. Beneath the ash tree's roots they hid, and lay there as though they were dead. The spider came, and there he found a cricket, a beetle, and a bug. "O cricket," he cried, "upon this mound sit and take snuff. Beetle, do thou beat a drum. And do thou crawl, O bug, the bun-like, beneath the ash, and spread abroad this news of me, the spider, the wrestler, the hero bold, that the spider, the wrestler, the hero bold, no longer in the world exists, that they have sent him to Kazan, that in Kazan, upon a block, they've chopped his head off, and the block destroyed." On the mound sat the cricket, and took snuff. The beetle smote upon the drum. The bug crawled in among the ash tree's roots, and cried, "Why have ye fallen? Wherefore, as in death, do ye lie here? Truly no longer lives the spider, the wrestler, the hero bold. They've sent him to Kazan, and in Kazan they've chopped his head off on a block, and afterwards destroyed the block." The gnats and flies grew blithe and merry. Thrice they crossed themselves, then out they flew, and straight into the spider's snares. Said he, "But seldom do ye come. I would that ye would far more often come to visit me, to quaff my wine and beer, and pay me tribute." The Smith and the Demon. Once upon a time there was a smith, and he had one son, a sharp, smart 6-year-old boy. One day the old man went to church, and as he stood before a picture of the Last Judgment, he saw a demon painted there, such a terrible one, black, with horns and a tail. "Oh my," says he to himself, "suppose I get just such another painted for the smithy." So he hired an artist, and ordered him to paint on the door of the smithy exactly such another demon as he had seen in the church. The artist painted it. Thenceforward, the old man, every time he entered the smithy, always looked at the demon and said, "Good morning, fellow countryman," and then he would lay the fire in the furnace and begin his work. Well, the smith lived in good accord with the demon for some 10 years. Then he fell ill and died. His son succeeded to his place as head of the household, and took the smithy into his own hands. But he was not disposed to show attention to the demon as the old man had done. When he went into the smithy in the morning, he never said, "Good morrow" to him. Instead of offering him a kindly word, he took the biggest hammer he had handy, and thumped the demon with it 3 times right on the forehead, and then he would go to his work. And when one of God's holy days came round, he would go to church and offer each saint a taper, but he would go up to the demon and spit in his face. Thus 3 years went by, he all the while favouring the evil one every morning, either with a spitting or with a hammering. The demon endured it, and at last found it past all endurance. It was too much for him. "I've had quite enough of this insolence from him," thinks he. Suppose I make use of a little diplomacy and play him some sort of a trick. So the demon took the form of a youth and went to the smithy. "Good day, uncle," says he. "Good day. What should you say, uncle, to taking me as an apprentice? At all events, I could carry fuel for you and blow the bellows." The smith liked the idea. "Why shouldn't I?" he replied. "Two are better than one." The demon began to learn his trade. At the end of a month, he knew more about smith's work than his master did himself, was able to do everything that his master couldn't do. It was a real pleasure to look at him. There's no describing how satisfied his master was with him, how fond he got of him. Sometimes the master didn't go into the smithy at all himself, but trusted entirely to his journeyman, who had complete charge of everything. Well, it happened one day that the master was not at home, and the journeyman was left all by himself in the smithy. Presently he saw an old lady driving along the street in her carriage, whereupon he poked his head out of doors and began shouting, "Hey, sirs! Be so good as to step in here. We've opened a new business here. We turn old folks into young ones." Out of her carriage jumped the lady in a trice, and ran into the smithy. "What's that you're bragging about? Do you mean to say it's true? Can you really do it?" she asked the youth. "We haven't got to learn our business," answered the demon. "If I hadn't been able to do it, I wouldn't have invited people to try." "And how much does it cost?" asked the lady. 500 rubles altogether." "Well then, there's your money. Make a young woman of me." The demon took the money. Then he sent the lady's coachman into the village. "Go," says he, "and bring me here 2 buckets full of milk." After that he took a pair of tongs, caught hold of the lady by the feet, flung her into the furnace, and burnt her up. Nothing was left of her but her bare bones. When the buckets of milk were brought, he emptied them into a large tub. Then he collected all the bones and flung them into the milk. Just fancy! At the end of about 3 minutes, the lady emerged from the milk alive, and young, and beautiful. Well, she got into her carriage and drove home. There she went straight to her husband, and he stared hard at her, but didn't know she was his wife. "What are you staring at?" says the lady. "I'm young and elegant, you see, and I don't want to have an old husband. Be off at once to the smithy, and get them to make you young. If you don't, I won't so much as acknowledge you." There was no help for it. Off set the seigneur. But by that time the smith had returned home, and had gone into the smithy. He looked about. The journeyman wasn't to be seen. He searched and searched. He inquired and inquired. Never a thing came of it. Not even a trace of the youth could be found. He took to his work by himself, and was hammering away, when at that moment up drove the seigneur, and walked straight into the smithy. "Make a young man of me," says he. "Are you in your right mind, Baron? How can one make a young man of you? Come now, you know all about that." "I know nothing of the kind." "You lie, you scoundrel. Since you made my old woman young, make me young too. Otherwise there will be no living with her for me. Why, I haven't so much as seen your good lady. Your journeyman saw her, and that's just the same thing. If he knew how to do the job, surely you, an old hand, must have learned how to do it long ago. Come now, set to work at once. If you don't, it will be the worse for you. I'll have you rubbed down with a birch-tree towel." The smith was compelled to try his hand at transforming the seigneur. He held a private conversation with the coachman as to how his journeyman had set to work with the lady, and what he had done to her. And then he thought, so be it. I'll do the same. If I fall on my feet, good. If I don't, well, I must suffer all the same. So he set to work at once, stripped the seigneur naked, laid hold of him by the legs with the tongs, popped him into the furnace, and began blowing the bellows. After he had burnt him to a cinder, he collected his remains, flung them into the milk, and then waited to see how soon a youthful seigneur would jump out of it. He waited 1 hour, 2 hours, but nothing came of it. He made a search in the tub. There was nothing in it but bones, and those charred ones. Just then the lady sent messengers to the smithy to ask whether the seigneur would soon be ready. The poor smith had to reply that the seigneur was no more. When the lady heard that the smith had only turned her husband into a cinder, instead of making him young, she was tremendously angry, and she called together her trusty servants and ordered them to drag him to the gallows. No sooner said than done. Her servants ran to the smith's house, laid hold of him, tied his hands together, and dragged him off to the gallows. All of a sudden there came up with them the youngster who used to live with the smith as his journeyman, who asked him, "Where are they taking you, master?" "They're going to hang me," replied the smith, and straightway related all that had happened to him. "Well, uncle," said the demon, "swear that you will never strike me with your hammer, but that you will pay me the same respect your father always paid, and the seigneur shall be alive and young too, in a trice." The smith began promising and swearing that he would never again lift his hammer against the demon, but would always pay him every attention. Thereupon the journeyman hastened to the smithy, and shortly afterwards came back again, bringing the seigneur with him, and crying to the servants, "Hold, hold, don't hang him, here's your master." Then they immediately untied the cords and let the smith go free. From that time forward the smith gave up spitting at the demon and striking him with his hammer. The journeyman disappeared and was never seen again. But the seigneur and his lady entered upon a prosperous course of life, and if they hadn't died, they're living still. The witch and the female snake. On the forms and natures of the less conspicuous characters to be found in either class, we will not at present dwell. An opportunity for commenting on some of them will be afforded in another chapter. To begin with, the snake. His outline, like that of the cloud with which he is so frequently associated and which he is often supposed to typify, is seldom well defined. Now in one form and now in another, he glides a shifting shape, of which it is difficult to obtain a satisfactory view. Sometimes he retains throughout the story an exclusively reptilian character. Sometimes he is of a mixed nature, partly serpent and partly man. In one story we see him riding on horseback, with hawk on wrist or raven on shoulder and hound at heel. In another, he figures as a composite being with a human body and a serpent's head. In a third, he flies as a fiery snake into his mistress's bower, stamps with his foot on the ground, and becomes a youthful gallant. But in most cases, he is a serpent, which in outward appearance seems to differ from other Ophidians, only in being winged and polycephalous, the number of his heads generally varying from 3 to 12. He is often known by the name of Zmei Snake, Gorwinwich, son of the Gora, or mountain, and sometimes he is supposed to dwell in the mountain caverns. To his abode, whether in the bowels of the earth or in the open light of day, whether it be a sumptuous palace or an isba on fowl's legs, a hut upheld by slender supports on which it turns as on a pivot, he carries off his prey. In one story he appears to have stolen or in some way concealed the daylight. In another, the bright moon and the many stars come forth from within him after his death. But as a general rule, it is some queen or princess whom he tears away from her home, as Pluto carried off Proserpina, and who remains with him reluctantly, and hails as her rescuer, the hero who comes to give him battle. Sometimes, however, the snake is represented as having a wife of his own species, and daughters who share their parents' tastes and powers. Such is the case in the South Russian story of Ivan Popyalof. Once upon a time there was an old couple, and they had 3 sons. 2 of these had their wits about them, but the third was a simpleton, Ivan by name, surnamed Popyalof. For 12 whole years Ivan lay among the ashes from the stove, but then he arose and shook himself, so that 6 poods of ashes fell off from him. Now, in the land in which Ivan lived, there was never any day, but always night. That was a snake's doing. Well, Ivan undertook to kill that snake, so he said to his father, "Father, make me a mace, 5 poods in weight." And when he had got the mace, he went out into the fields and flung it straight up in the air, and then he went home. The next day he went out into the fields to the spot from which he had flung the mace on high, and stood there with his head thrown back. So when the mace fell down again, it hit him on the forehead, and the mace broke in 2. Ivan went home and said to his father, "Father, make me another mace, a 10-pood one." And when he had got it, he went out into the fields and flung it aloft, and the mace went flying through the air for 3 days and 3 nights. On the 4th day, Ivan went out to the same spot, and when the mace came tumbling down, he put his knee in the way, and the mace broke over it into 3 pieces. Ivan went home and told his father to make him a 3rd mace, one of 15 poods weight. And when he had got it, he went out into the fields and flung it aloft, and the mace was up in the air 6 days. On the 7th, Ivan went to the same spot as before. Down fell the mace, and when it struck Ivan's forehead, the forehead bowed under it. Thereupon he said, "This mace will do for the snake." So when he had got everything ready, he went forth with his brothers to fight the snake. He rode and rode, and presently there stood before him a hut on fowl's legs, and in that hut lived the snake. There all the party came to a standstill. Then Ivan hung up his gloves, and said to his brothers, "Should blood drop from my gloves, make haste to help me." When he had said this, he went into the hut and sat down under the boarding. Presently there rode up a snake with 3 heads. His steed stumbled, his hound howled, his falcon clamoured. Then cried the snake, "Wherefore hast thou stumbled, O steed? Hast thou howled, O hound? Hast thou clamoured, O falcon?" "How can I but stumble," replied the steed, "when under the boarding sits Ivan Popyalof?" Then said the snake, "Come forth, Ivanushka. Let us try our strength together." Ivan came forth, and they began to fight. And Ivan killed the snake, and then sat down again beneath the boarding. Presently there came another snake, a 6-headed one, and him too Ivan killed. And then there came a third, which had 12 heads. Well, Ivan began to fight with him, and lopped off 9 of his heads. The snake had no strength left in him. Just then a raven came flying by, and it croaked, "Croff! Croff!" Then the snake cried to the raven, "Fly, and tell my wife to come and devour Ivan Popyalof." But Ivan cried, "Fly, and tell my brothers to come, and then we will kill this snake and give his flesh to thee." And the raven gave ear to what Ivan said, and flew to his brothers and began to croak above their heads. The brothers awoke, and when they heard the cry of the raven, they hastened to their brother's aid. And they killed the snake, and then, having taken his heads, they went into his hut and destroyed them. And immediately there was bright light throughout the whole land. After killing the snake, Ivan Popyalof and his brothers set off on their way home. But he had forgotten to take away his gloves, so he went back to fetch them, telling his brothers to wait for him meanwhile. Now, when he had reached the hut and was going to take away his gloves, he heard the voices of the snake's wife and daughters, who were talking with each other. So he turned himself into a cat and began to mew outside the door. They let him in, and he listened to everything they said. Then he got his gloves and hastened away. As soon as he came to where his brothers were, he mounted his horse, and they all started afresh. They rode and rode. Presently they saw before them a green meadow, and on that meadow lay silken cushions. Then the elder brothers said, "Let's turn out our horses to graze here, while we rest ourselves a little." But Ivan said, "Wait a minute, brothers." And he seized his mace and struck the cushions with it. And out of those cushions there streamed blood. So they all went on further. They rode and rode. Presently there stood before them an apple tree, and upon it were gold and silver apples. Then the elder brother said, "Let's eat an apple apiece." But Ivan said, "Wait a minute, brothers, I'll try them first." And he took his mace and struck the apple tree with it, and out of the tree streamed blood. So they went on further. They rode and rode, and by they saw a spring in front of them. And the elder brothers cried, "Let's have a drink of water." But Ivan Popyalof cried, "Stop, brothers!" And he raised his mace and struck the spring, and its waters became blood. For the meadow, the silken cushions, the apple tree, and the spring were all of them daughters of the snake. After killing the snake's daughters, Ivan and his brothers went on homewards. Presently came the snake's wife flying after them, and she opened her jaws from the sky to the earth, and tried to swallow up Ivan. But Ivan and his brothers threw 3 poods of salt into her mouth. She swallowed the salt, thinking it was Ivan Popyalof. But afterwards, when she had tasted the salt, and found out it was not Ivan, she flew after him again. Then he perceived that danger was at hand, and so he let his horse go free, and hid himself behind 12 doors in the forge of Kuzma and Demian. The snake's wife came flying up, and said to Kuzma and Demian, "Give me up, Ivan Popyalof." But they replied, "Send your tongue through the 12 doors and take him." So the snake's wife began licking the doors. But meanwhile they all heated iron pincers, and as soon as she had sent her tongue through into the smithy, they caught tight hold of her by the tongue and began thumping her with hammers. And when the snake's wife was dead, they consumed her with fire and scattered her ashes to the winds. And then they went home, and there they lived and enjoyed themselves, feasting and revelling and drinking mead and wine. I was there too, and had liquor to drink. It didn't go into my mouth, but only ran down my beard. The skazka of Ivan Buykovich, Bull's son, contains a variant of part of this story. But the dragon which the Slavonic St. George kills is called not a snake, but a chudo-yudo. Ivan watches one night while his brothers sleep. Presently up rides a 6-headed chudo-yudo, which he easily kills. The next night he slays, but with more difficulty, a 9-headed specimen of the same family. On the 3rd night appears a 12-headed chudo-yudo, mounted on a horse with 12 wings, its coat of silver, its mane and tail of gold. Ivan lops off 3 of the monster's heads, but they, like those of the Linnaean Hydra, become reattached to their necks at the touch of their owner's fiery finger. Ivan, whom his foe has driven into the ground up to his knees, hurls one of his gloves at the hut in which his brothers are sleeping. It smashes the windows, but the sleepers slumber on and take no heed. Presently Ivan smites off 6 of his antagonist's heads, but they grow again as before. Half buried in the ground by the monster's strength, Ivan hurls his other glove at the hut, piercing its roof this time. But still his brothers slumber on. At last, after fruitlessly shearing off 9 of the chudo-yudo's heads and finding himself embedded in the ground up to his armpits, Ivan flings his cap at the hut. The hut reels under the blow, and its beams fall asunder. His brothers awake and hasten to his aid, and the chudo-yudo is destroyed. The chudo-yudo wives as the widows of the three monsters are called, then proceed to play the parts attributed in Ivan Popyalof to the snake's daughters. "I will become an apple tree with golden and silver apples," says the first. "Whoever plucks an apple will immediately burst," says the second. "I will become a spring on the water will float 2 cups, the one golden, the other of silver. Whoever touches one of the cups, him will I drown." And the third says, "I will become a golden bed. Whoever lies down upon that bed will be consumed with fire." Ivan, in a sparrow's form, overhears all this, and acts as in the preceding story. The 3 widows die, but their mother, an old witch, determines on revenge. Under the form of a beggar woman, she asks alms from the retreating brothers. Ivan tenders her a ducat. She seizes, not the ducat, but his outstretched hand, and in a moment whisks him off underground to her husband, an aged one, whose appearance is that of the mythical being whom the Servians call the Vi. He lies on an iron couch and sees nothing. His long eyelashes and thick eyebrows completely hide his eyes, but he sends for 12 mighty heroes, and orders them to take iron forks and lift up the hair about his eyes. And then he gazes at the destroyer of his family. The glance of the Servian V is supposed to be as deadly as that of a basilisk, but the patriarch of the Russian story does not injure his captive. He merely sends him on an errand which leads to a fresh set of adventures, of which we need not now take notice. In a third variant of the story, they are snakes which are killed by the hero, Ivan Koshkin, Cat's son. And it is a Baba Yaga, or hag, who undertakes to revenge their deaths and those of their wives, her daughters. Accordingly, she pursues the 3 brothers and succeeds in swallowing 2 of them. The third, Ivan Koshkin, takes refuge in a smithy, and, as before, the monster's tongue is seized, and she is beaten with hammers until she disgorges her prey, none the worse for their temporary imprisonment. We have seen in the story about the Chudo-Yudo that the place usually occupied by the snake is at times filled by some other magical being. This frequently occurs in that class of stories which relates how 3 brothers set out to apprehend a trespasser, or to seek a mother or sister who has been mysteriously spirited away. They usually come either to an opening which leads into the underground world, or to the base of an apparently inaccessible hill. The youngest brother descends or ascends, as the case may be, and after a series of adventures which generally lead him through the kingdoms of copper, of silver, and of gold, returns in triumph to where his brothers are awaiting him. And he is almost invariably deserted by them. As soon as they have secured the beautiful princesses who accompany him, as may be read in the following South Russian history of the Norka. Once upon a time, there lived a king and queen. They had 3 sons, 2 of them with their wits about them, but the third a simpleton. Now the king had a deer park, in which were quantities of wild animals of different kinds. Into that park there used to come a huge beast. Norka was its name, and do fearful mischief, devouring some of the animals every night. The king did all he could, but he was unable to destroy it. So at last he called his sons together and said, "Whoever will destroy the Norka, to him will I give the half of my kingdom." Well, the eldest son undertook the task. As soon as it was night, he took his weapons and set out. But before he reached the park, he went into a traktir or tavern, and there he spent the whole night in revelry. When he came to his senses, it was too late. The day had already dawned. He felt himself disgraced in the eyes of his father, but there was no help for it. The next day, the second son went and did just the same. Their father scolded them both soundly, and there was an end of it. Well, on the third day, the youngest son undertook the task. They all laughed him to scorn, because he was so stupid, feeling sure he wouldn't do anything. But he took his arms and went straight into the park and sat down on the grass in such a position that, the moment he went to sleep, his weapons would prick him and he would awake. Presently the midnight hour sounded. The earth began to shake, and the Norka came rushing up and burst right through the fence into the park. So huge was it. The prince pulled himself together, leapt to his feet, crossed himself, and went straight at the beast. It fled back, and the prince ran after it. But he soon saw that he couldn't catch it on foot. So he hastened to the stable, laid his hands on the best horse there, and set off in pursuit. Presently he came up with the beast, and they began a fight. They fought and fought. The prince gave the beast 3 wounds. At last they were both utterly exhausted, so they lay down to take a short rest. But the moment the prince closed his eyes, up jumped the beast and took to flight. The prince's horse awoke him. Up he jumped in a moment, and set off again in pursuit, caught up the beast, and again began fighting with it. Again the prince gave the beast 3 wounds, and then he and the beast lay down again to rest. Thereupon away fled the beast as before. The prince caught it up, and again gave it 3 wounds. But all of a sudden, just as the prince began chasing it for the 4th time, the beast fled to a great white stone, tilted it up, and escaped into the other world, crying out to the prince, "Then only will you overcome me when you enter here." The prince went home, told his father all that had happened, and asked him to have a leather rope plaited, long enough to reach to the other world. His father ordered this to be done. When the rope was made, the prince called for his brothers, and he and they, having taken servants with them and everything that was needed for a whole year, set out for the place where the beast had disappeared under the stone. When they got there, they built a palace on the spot and lived in it for some time. But when everything was ready, the youngest brother said to the others, "Now, brothers, who is going to lift this stone?" Neither of them could so much as stir it. But as soon as he touched it, away it flew to a distance, though it was ever so big as a hill. And when he had flung the stone aside, he spoke a second time to his brothers, saying, "Who is going into the other world to overcome the Norka?" Neither of them offered to do so. Then he laughed at them for being such cowards, and said, "Well, brothers, farewell, lower me into the other world, and don't go away from here. But as soon as the cord is jerked, pull it up." His brothers lowered him accordingly, and when he had reached the other world underneath the earth, he went on his way. He walked and walked. Presently he espied a horse with rich trappings, and it said to him, "Hail, Prince Ivan! Long have I awaited thee." He mounted the horse and rode on, rode and rode, until he saw standing before him a palace made of copper. He entered the courtyard, tied up his horse, and went indoors. In one of the rooms a dinner was laid out. He sat down and dined, and then went into a bedroom. There he found a bed, on which he lay down to rest. Presently there came in a lady, more beautiful than can be imagined anywhere but in a skazka, who said, "Thou who art in my house, name thyself. If thou art an old man, thou shalt be my father. If a middle-aged man, my brother. But if a young man, thou shalt be my husband, dear. And if thou art a woman, and an old one, thou shalt be my grandmother, if middle-aged, my mother, and if a girl, thou shalt be my own sister." Thereupon he came forth, and when she saw him, she was delighted with him, and said, "Wherefore, O Prince Ivan, my husband, dear shalt thou be? Wherefore hast thou come hither?" Then he told her all that had happened, and she said, "That beast which thou wishest to overcome is my brother. He is staying just now with my second sister, who lives not far from here in a silver palace. I bound up 3 of the wounds which thou didst give him. Well, After this they drank and enjoyed themselves, and held sweet converse together. And then the prince took leave of her, and went on to the second sister, the one who lived in the silver palace, and with her also he stayed a while. She told him that her brother Norka was then at her youngest sister's. So he went on to the youngest sister, who lived in a golden palace. She told him that her brother was at that time asleep on the blue sea, and she gave him a sword of steel and a draught of the water of strength, and she told him to cut off her brother's head at a single stroke. And when he had heard these things, he went his way. And when the prince came to the blue sea, he looked there, slept, Norka on a stone in the middle of the sea, and when it snored, the water was agitated for 7 versts around. The prince crossed himself, went up to it and smote it on the head with his sword. The head jumped off, saying the while, "Well, I'm done for now," and rolled far away into the sea. After killing the beast, the prince went back again, picking up all the 3 sisters by the way, with the intention of taking them out into the upper world, for they all loved him and would not be separated from him. Each of them turned her palace into an egg, for they were all enchantresses, and they taught him how to turn the eggs into palaces and back again, and they handed over the eggs to him. And then they all went to the place from which they had to be hoisted into the upper world. And when they came to where the rope was, the prince took hold of it and made the maidens fast to it. Then he jerked away at the rope, and his brothers began to haul it up. And when they had hauled it up, and had set eyes on the wondrous maidens, they went aside and said, "Let's lower the rope, pull our brother part of the way up, and then cut the rope. Perhaps he'll be killed, but then if he isn't, he'll never give us these beauties as wives." So when they had agreed on this, they lowered the rope. But their brother was no fool, he guessed what they were at, so he fastened the rope to a stone, and then gave it a pull. His brothers hoisted the stone to a great height, and then cut the rope. Down fell the stone, and broke in pieces. The prince poured forth tears and went away. Well, he walked and walked. Presently a storm arose, the lightning flashed, the thunder roared, the rain fell in torrents. He went up to a tree in order to take shelter under it, and on that tree he saw some young birds which were being thoroughly drenched. So he took off his coat and covered them over with it, and he himself sat down under the tree. Presently there came flying a bird, such a big one that the light was blotted out by it. It had been dark there before, but now it became darker still. Now this was the mother of those small birds which the prince had covered up. And when the bird had come flying up, she perceived that her little ones were covered over, and she said, "Who has wrapped up my nestlings?" And presently, seeing the prince, she added, "Didst thou do that? Thanks. In return, ask of me anything thou desirest. I will do anything for thee." "Then carry me into the other world," he replied. "Make me a large zazyek with a partition in the middle," she said. "Catch all sorts of game, and put them into one half of it, and into the other half pour water, so that there may be meat and drink for me." All this the prince did. Then the bird, having taken the zasyek on her back, with the prince sitting in the middle of it, began to fly. And after flying some distance, she brought him to his journey's end, took leave of him, and flew away back. But he went to the house of a certain tailor, and engaged himself as his servant. So much the worse for wear was he, so thoroughly had he altered in appearance, that nobody would have suspected him of being a prince. Having entered into the service of this master, the prince began to ask what was going on in that country, and his master replied, "Our 2 princes, for the 3rd one has disappeared, have brought away brides from the other world, and want to marry them, but those brides refuse, for they insist on having all their wedding clothes made for them first, exactly like those which they used to have in the other world. and that without being measured for them. The king has called all the workmen together, but not one of them will undertake to do it." The prince, having heard all this, said, "Go to the king, master, and tell him that you will provide everything that's in your line. However can I undertake to make clothes of that sort? I work for quite common folks," says his master. "Go along, master, I will answer for everything," says the prince. So the tailor went. The king was delighted that at least one good workman had been found, and gave him as much money as ever he wanted. When the tailor had settled everything, he went home, and the prince said to him, "Now then, pray to God, and lie down to sleep. Tomorrow all will be ready." And the tailor followed his lad's advice and went to bed. Midnight sounded. The prince arose, went out of the city into the fields, took out of his pocket the eggs which the maidens had given him, and, as they had taught him, turned them into 3 palaces. Into each of these he entered, took the maidens' robes, went out again, turned the palaces back into eggs, and went home. And when he got there, he hung up the robes on the wall and lay down to sleep. Early in the morning his master awoke, and behold, there hung such robes as he had never seen before, all shining with gold and silver and precious stones. He was delighted, and he seized them and carried them off to the king. When the princesses saw that the clothes were those which had been theirs in the other world, they guessed that Prince Ivan was in this world, so they exchanged glances with each other, but they held their peace. And the master, having handed over the clothes, went home. But he no longer found his dear journeyman there, for the prince had gone to a shoemaker's, and him too he sent to work for the king. And in the same way he went the round of all the artificers, and they all proffered him thanks, inasmuch as through him they were enriched by the king. By the time the princely workmen had gone, the round of all the artificers, the princesses had received what they had asked for. All their clothes were just like what they had been in the other world. Then they wept bitterly, because the prince had not come, and it was impossible for them to hold out any longer. It was necessary that they should be married. But when they were ready for the wedding, the youngest bride said to the king, "Allow me, my father, to go and give alms to the beggars." He gave her leave, and she went and began bestowing alms upon them, and examining them closely. And when she had come to one of them, and was going to give him some money, she caught sight of the ring which she had given to the prince in the other world, and her sister's rings too, for it really was he. So she seized him by the hand, and brought him into the hall, and said to the king, "Here is he who brought us out of the other world. His brothers forbade us to say that he was alive, threatening to slay us if we did." Then the king was wroth with those sons, and punished them as he thought best, and afterwards 3 weddings were celebrated. The conclusion of this story is somewhat obscure. Most of the variants represent the prince as forgiving his brothers and allowing them to marry 2 of the 3 princesses. But the present version appears to keep closer to its original, in which the prince doubtless married all 3. With this story may be compared Grimm No, De Stache Hans, and No, Dat Erdmeieniken. See also Vol. E.E. P, where a reference is given to the Hungarian story in Gaul, No, Doesn't, No, The Big Bird Dan, and No, Soria Moria Castle. Asbjörnsen and Moe, Nos, and Ice. And a somewhat similar story, only the palaces are in the air, occurs in Asbjörnsen's Ny Samling, No. Campbell's Tales of the West Highlands, No. Schleicher's Litoche Märchen, No. The Polish story, Buciki Buk I, No. in which Norka is replaced by a witch who breaks the windows of a church and is wounded in falcon shape by the youngest brother Han. No, in which a Dracos, as a cloud, steals golden apples, a story closely resembling the Russian skazka. See also Number, very similar to which is the Servian story in Vuk Karadžić. No, and a very interesting Tuscan story printed for the first time by A. de Gubernatis, Zoological Mythology, Volume I.P. See also Ibid. P. But still more important than these are the parallels offered by Indian fiction. Take, for instance, the story of Sringabuja in Chap, XXXC of Book VI, of the Kathasarit Sagara. In it, the elder sons of a certain king wish to get rid of their younger half-brother. One day, a Rakshasa appears in the form of a gigantic crane. The other princes shoot at it in vain, but the youngest wounds it, and then sets off in pursuit of it, and of the valuable arrow which is fixed in it. After long wandering, he comes to a castle in a forest. There he finds a maiden who tells him she is the daughter of the Rakshasa, whom, in the form of a crane, he has wounded. She at once takes his part against her demon father, and eventually flies with him to his own country. The perils which the fugitives have to encounter would be mentioned in the remarks on Skarsgård Zayek's Thee. See Professor Brockhaus's summary of the story in the Berichte der Viel. Hist. Klasse der K6. Gesellschaft der Wissenschaften, pp. Also Professor Wilson's version in his Essays on Sanskrit Literature, Volume I, pp. In two other stories in the same collection, the hero gives chase to a boar of gigantic size. It takes refuge in a cavern into which he follows it. Presently, he finds himself in a different world, wherein he meets a beauteous maiden who explains everything to him. In the first of these two stories, the lady is the daughter of a Rakshasa, who is invulnerable except in the palm of the left hand, for which reason our hero, Chandasena, has been unable to wound him when in his boar disguise. She instructs Chandasena how to kill her father, who accordingly falls a victim to a well-aimed shaft. Brockhaus's Märchensammlung des Sumadeva Bhatta, Volume I.P.P. In the other story, the lady turns out to be a princess whom a demon with fiery eyes had carried off and imprisoned. She tells the hero, Saktideva, that the demon has just died from a wound inflicted upon him while transformed into a boar by a bold archer. Saktideva informs her that he is that archer, whereupon she immediately requests him to marry her. In both stories, the boar is described as committing great ravages in the upper world until the hero attacks it. The adventures of a prince, the youngest of three brothers, who has been lowered into the underground world, or who has ascended into an enchanted upper realm, form the theme of numerous skazkas, several of which are variants of the story of Norka. The prince's elder brothers almost always attempt to kill him when he is about to ascend from the gulf or descend from the steeps which separate him from them. In one instance, the following excuse is offered for their conduct. The hero has killed a snake in the underground world and is carrying its head on a lance when his brothers begin to hoist him up. His brothers were frightened at the sight of that head, and thinking the snake itself was coming, they let Ivan fall back into the pit. But this apology for their behavior seems to be due to the storyteller's imagination. In some instances, their unfraternal conduct may be explained in the following manner. In Oriental tales, the hero is often the son of a king's youngest wife, and he is not unnaturally hated by his half-brothers, the sons of an older queen, whom the hero's mother has supplanted in their royal father's affections. Accordingly, they do their best to get rid of him. Thus, in one of the Indian stories which correspond to that of Norka, the hero's success at court excited the envy and jealousy of his brothers, doubtless half-brothers, and they were not satisfied until they had devised a plan to effect his removal and, as they hoped, accomplish his destruction. We know also that Israel loved Joseph more than all his children, because he was the son of his old age, and the result was that when his brethren, who were only his half-brothers, saw that their father loved him more than all his brethren, they hated him. When such tales as these came west in Christian times, their references to polygamy were constantly suppressed, and their distinctions between brothers and half-brothers disappeared. In the same way, the elder and jealous wife, who had behaved with cruelty in the original stories to the offspring of her rival, often became turned under Christian influences into a stepmother who hated her husband's children by a previous marriage. There may, however, be a mythological explanation of the behavior of the two elder brothers. Professor Gubernatis is of opinion that in the Vedic hymns, Tritus, the third brother, and the ablest as well as best, is persecuted by his brothers, who, in a fit of jealousy, on account of his wife, the Aurora, and the riches she brings with her from the realm of darkness, the cistern, or well into which he has been lowered, detain their brother in the well. And he compares this form of the myth with that which it assumes in the following Hindu tradition. 3 brothers, Ikata, i.e. the first, Dvita, i.e. the second, and Trita, i.e. the third, were travelling in a desert, and being distressed with thirst, came to a well, from which the youngest, Trita, drew water and gave it to his brothers in requital. They drew him into the well, in order to appropriate his property, and, having covered the top with a cartwheel, left him in the well. In this extremity he prayed to the gods to extricate him, and by their favour he made his escape. This myth may, perhaps, be the germ from which have sprung the numerous folk tales about the desertion of a younger brother in some pit or chasm into which his brothers have lowered him. It may seem more difficult to account for the willingness of Norka's 3 sisters to aid in his destruction, unless, indeed, the whole story be considered to be mythological, as its Indian equivalents undoubtedly are. But in many versions of the same tale, the difficulty does not arise. The princesses of the copper, silver, and golden realms are usually represented as united by no ties of consanguinity with the snake or other monster whom the hero comes to kill. In the story of Yusinya, for instance, there appears to be no relationship between these fair maidens and the Yusinya bird, which steals the golden apples from a monarch's garden and is killed by his youngest son Ivan. That monster is not so much a bird as a flying dragon. This Husuinya bird is a 12-headed snake, says one of the fair maidens, and presently it arrives, its wings stretching afar, while along the ground trail its moustaches Usui, whence its name. In a variant of the same story in another collection, the part of Norka is played by a white wolf. In that of Ivan Suchenko, it is divided among 3 snakes who have stolen as many princesses. For the snake is much given to abduction, especially when he appears under the terrible form of Koshchei, the Deathless. Koshchei is merely one of the many incarnations of the dark spirit which takes so many monstrous shapes in the folk tales of the class with which we are now dealing. Sometimes he is described as altogether serpent-like in form. Sometimes he seems to be of a mixed nature, partly human and partly Ophidian. But in some of the stories he is apparently framed after the fashion of a man. His name is by some mythologists derived from kost, a bone, whence comes a verb signifying to become ossified, petrified, or frozen. either because he is bony of limb or because he produces an effect akin to freezing or petrifaction. He is called immortal, or the deathless, because of his superiority to the ordinary laws of existence. Sometimes, like Balder, he cannot be killed except by one substance, sometimes his death. That is, the object with which his life is indissolubly connected does not exist within his body, like the vital center of the giant who had no heart in his body. In the well-known Norse tale, it is something extraneous to the being whom it affects, and until it is destroyed, he may set all ordinary means of annihilation at defiance. But this is not always the case, as may be learnt from one of the best of the skazkas in which he plays a leading part. The history of Marya Morevna. "Hard will it be for you to find her," replied the raven. "Anyhow, leave your silver snuff-box with us. We will look at it and remember you." The prince handed over his silver snuff-box, took his leave and went his way. One day he went, another day he went, and on the third day he came to where Marya Morevna was. She caught sight of her love, flung her arms around his neck, burst into tears, and exclaimed, "Oh, Prince Ivan, why did you disobey me, and go looking into the closet and letting out Koshchei the Deathless? Forgive me, Marya Morevna. Remember not the past. Much better fly with me while Koshchei the Deathless is out of sight. Perhaps he won't catch us." So they got ready and fled. Now Koshchei was out hunting. Towards evening he was returning home, when his good steed stumbled beneath him. "Why stumblest thou, sorry jade? Scentest thou some ill?" The steed replied. "Prince Ivan has come and carried off Marya Morevna. Is it possible to catch them? It is possible to sow wheat, to wait till it grows up, to reap it and thresh it, to grind it to flour, to make 5 pies of it, to eat those pies, and then to start in pursuit, and even then to be in time." Koshchei galloped off and caught up Prince Ivan. "Now," says he, "this time I will forgive you, in return for your kindness in giving me water to drink. And a second time I will forgive you, but the third time beware. I will cut you to bits." Then he took Marya Morevna from him and carried her off. But Prince Ivan sat down on a stone and burst into tears. He wept and then returned back again to Marya Morevna. Now Koshchei the Deathless happened not to be at home. "Let us fly, Marya Morevna." "Ah, Prince Ivan!" "He will catch us." "Suppose he does catch us? At all events, we shall have spent an hour or 2 together." So they got ready and fled. As Koshchei the Deathless was returning home, his good steed stumbled beneath him. "Why stumblest thou, sorry jade? Scentest thou some ill? Prince Ivan has come and carried off Marya Morevna. Is it possible to catch them?" It is possible to sow barley, to wait till it grows up, to reap it and thresh it, to brew beer, to drink ourselves drunk on it, to sleep our fill, and then to set off in pursuit, and yet to be in time. Koshchei galloped off, caught up Prince Ivan. "Didn't I tell you that you should not see Marya Morevna any more than your own ears?" And he took her away and carried her off home with him. Prince Ivan was left there alone. He wept and wept. Then he went back again after Marya Morevna. Koshchei happened to be away from home at that moment. "Let us fly, Marya Morevna." "Ah, Prince Ivan, he is sure to catch us and hew you in pieces." "Let him hew away. I cannot live without you." So they got ready and fled. Koshchei the Deathless was returning home when his good steed stumbled beneath him. "Why stumblest thou? Scentest thou any ill? Prince Ivan has come and has carried off Marya Morevna." Koshchei galloped off, caught Prince Ivan, chopped him into little pieces, put them in a barrel, smeared it with pitch, and bound it with iron hoops, and flung it into the blue sea. But Marya Morevna he carried off home. At that very time, The silver turned black, which Prince Ivan had left with his brothers-in-law. "Ah," said they, "the evil is accomplished sure enough." Then the eagle hurried to the blue sea, caught hold of the barrel and dragged it ashore. The falcon flew away for the water of life, and the raven for the water of death. Afterwards they all three met, broke open the barrel, took out the remains of Prince Ivan, washed them, and put them together in fitting order. The raven sprinkled them with the water of death. The pieces joined together, the body became whole. The falcon sprinkled it with the water of life. Prince Ivan shuddered, stood up, and said, "Ah, what a time I've been sleeping! You'd have gone on sleeping a good deal longer if it hadn't been for us," replied his brothers-in-law. "Now come and pay us a visit." "Not so, brothers, I shall go and look for Marya Morevna." And when he had found her, he said to her, "Find out from Koshchei the Deathless whence he got so good a steed." So Marya Morevna chose a favourable moment and began asking Koshchei about it. Koshchei replied, "Beyond thrice 9 lands, in the 30th kingdom, on the other side of the fiery river, there lives a Baba Yaga. She has so good a mare that she flies right round the world on it every day. And she has many other splendid mares. I watched her herds for 3 days without losing a single mare, and in return for that the Baba Yaga gave me a foal." "But how did you get across the fiery river?" "Why, I have a handkerchief of this kind. When I wave it thrice on the right hand, there springs up a very lofty bridge, and the fire cannot reach it." Marya Morevna listened to all this and repeated it to Prince Ivan, and she carried off the handkerchief and gave it to him. So he managed to get across the fiery river, and then went on to the Baba Yaga's. Long went he on without getting anything either to eat or to drink. At last he came across an outlandish bird and its young ones. Says Prince Ivan, "I'll eat one of these chickens." "Don't eat it, Prince Ivan," begs the outlandish bird. "Some time or other I'll do you a good turn." He went on farther and saw a hive of bees in the forest. "I'll get a bit of honeycomb," says he. "Don't disturb my honey, Prince Ivan," exclaims the queen bee. "Some time or other I'll do you a good turn." So he didn't disturb it, but went on. Presently there met him a lioness with her cub. "Anyhow, I'll eat this lion cub," says he. "I'm so hungry I feel quite unwell." "Please let us alone, Prince Ivan," begs the lioness. "Some time or other I'll do you a good turn." "Very well, have it your own way," says he. Hungry and faint he wandered on, walked farther and farther, and at last came to where stood the house of the Baba Yaga. Round the house were set 12 poles in a circle, and on each of 11 of these poles was stuck a human head. The 12th alone remained unoccupied. "Hail, Granny! Hail, Prince Ivan! Wherefore have you come? Is it of your own accord, or on compulsion?" "I have come to earn from you a heroic steed." "So be it, Prince. You won't have to serve a year with me, but just 3 days. If you take good care of my mares, I'll give you a heroic steed. But if you don't, why then you mustn't be annoyed at finding your head stuck on top of the last pole up there." Prince Ivan agreed to these terms. The Baba Yaga gave him food and drink and bid him set about his business. But the moment he had driven the mares afield, they cocked up their tails, and away they tore across the meadows in all directions. Before the prince had time to look round, they were all out of sight. Thereupon he began to weep and to disquiet himself, and then he sat down upon a stone and went to sleep. But when the sun was near its setting, the outlandish bird came flying up to him and awakened him, saying, "Arise, Prince Ivan, the mares are at home now." The prince arose and returned home. There the Baba Yaga was storming and raging at her mares and shrieking, "Whatever did ye come home for? How could we help coming home?" said they. There came flying birds from every part of the world, and all but pecked our eyes out. "Well, well, tomorrow don't go galloping over the meadows, but disperse amid the thick forests." Prince Ivan slept all night. In the morning the Baba Yaga says to him, "Mind, Prince, if you don't take good care of the mares, if you lose merely one of them, your bold head will be stuck on that pole." He drove the mares afield. Immediately they cocked up their tails and dispersed among the thick forests. Again did the prince sit down on the stone, weep, and then go to sleep. The sun went down behind the forest. Up came running the lioness. "Arise, Prince Ivan, the mares are all collected." Prince Ivan arose and went home. More than ever did the Baba Yaga storm at her mares and shriek, "Whatever did ye come back home for? How could we help coming back? Beasts of prey came running at us from all parts of the world, all but tore us utterly to pieces." Well, tomorrow run off into the blue sea. Again did Prince Ivan sleep through the night. Next morning the Baba Yaga sent him forth to watch the mares. "If you don't take good care of them," says she, "your bold head will be stuck on that pole." He drove the mares afield. Immediately they cocked up their tails, disappeared from sight, and fled into the blue sea. There they stood, up to their necks in water. Prince Ivan sat down on the stone, wept, and fell asleep. But when the sun had set behind the forest, up came flying a bee and said, "Arise, Prince, the mares are all collected. But when you get home, don't let the Baba Yaga set eyes on you, but go into the stable and hide behind the mangers. There you will find a sorry colt rolling in the muck. Do you steal it, and at the dead of night ride away from the house." Prince Ivan arose, slipped into the stable, and lay down behind the mangers, while the Baba Yaga was storming away at her mares and shrieking, "Why did ye come back? How could we help coming back?" There came flying bees in countless numbers from all parts of the world, and began stinging us on all sides till the blood came. The Baba Yaga went to sleep. In the dead of the night, Prince Ivan stole the sorry coat, saddled it, jumped on its back, and galloped away to the fiery river. When he came to that river, he waved the handkerchief 3 times on the right hand, and suddenly, springing goodness knows whence, there hung across the river, high in the air, a splendid bridge. The prince rode across the bridge and waved the handkerchief twice. Only on the left hand there remained across the river a thin, ever so thinner bridge. When the Baba Yaga got up in the morning, the sorry coat was not to be seen. Off she set in pursuit. At full speed did she fly in her iron mortar, urging it on with the pestle, sweeping away her traces with the broom. She dashed up to the fiery river, gave a glance, and said, "A capital bridge." She drove on to the bridge, but had only got halfway when the bridge broke in 2, and the Baba Yaga went flop into the river. There truly did she meet with a cruel death. Prince Ivan fattened up the coat in the green meadows, and it turned into a wondrous steed. Then he rode to where Marya Morevna was. She came running out and flung herself on his neck, crying, "By what means has God brought you back to life?" "Thus and thus," says he. "Now come along with me." "I am afraid, Prince Ivan, if Koshchei catches us, you will be cut in pieces again." "No, he won't catch us. I have a splendid heroic steed now. It flies just like a bird." So they got on its back and rode away. Koshchei the Deathless was returning home when his horse stumbled beneath him. "What art thou stumbling for, sorry jade? Dost thou scent any ill? Prince Ivan has come and carried off Marya Morevna. Can we catch them?" "God knows. Prince Ivan has a horse now which is better than I." "Well, I can't stand it. says Koshchei the Deathless. I will pursue. After a time he came up with Prince Ivan, lighted on the ground, and was going to chop him up with his sharp sword. But at that moment Prince Ivan's horse smote Koshchei the Deathless, full swing with its hoof, and cracked his skull, and the prince made an end of him with a club. Afterwards the prince heaped up a pile of wood, set fire to it, burnt Koshchei the Deathless on the pyre, and scattered his ashes to the wind. Then Marya Morevna mounted Koshchei's horse, and Prince Ivan got on his own, and they rode away to visit, first the raven, and then the eagle, and then the falcon. Wherever they went, they met with a joyful greeting. "Ah, Prince Ivan! Why, we never expected to see you again." "Well, it wasn't for nothing that you gave yourself so much trouble. Such a beauty as Marya Morevna one might search for all the world over and never find one like her." And so they visited, and they feasted, and afterwards they went off to their own realm. With the Baba Yaga, the feminine counterpart of Koshchei and the snake, we shall deal presently, and the waters of life and death will find special notice elsewhere. A magic water, which brings back the dead to life, plays a prominent part in the folklore of all lands. But the two waters, each performing one part only of the cure, render very noteworthy the Slavonic stories in which they occur. The princess, Marya Morevna, who slaughters whole armies before she is married and then becomes mild and gentle, belongs to a class of heroines who frequently occur both in the stories and in the metrical romances, and to whom may be applied the remarks made by Kemble with reference to a similar Amazon. In one of the variants of the story, the representative of Marya Morevna fights the hero before she marries him. The Bluebeard incident of the Forbidden Closet is one which often occurs in the skazkas, as we shall see further on, and the same may be said about the gratitude of the bird, bee, and lioness. The story of immortal Koshchei is one of very frequent occurrence, but different versions maintaining a unity of idea, but varying considerably in detail. In one of them, in which Koshchei's part is played by a snake, the hero's sisters are carried off by their feathered admirers without his Liu being asked on a mission, for which a full apology is afterwards made. In another, the history of Fedor Tugarin and Anastasia the Fair, the hero's three sisters are wooed and won, not by the falcon, the eagle, and the raven, but by the wind, the hail, and the thunder. He himself marries the terrible heroine, Anastasia the Fair, in the forbidden chamber of whose palace he finds a snake hung up by one of its ribs. He gives it a lift, and it gets free from its hook and flies away, carrying off Anastasia the Fair. Fedor eventually finds her, escapes with her, on a magic foal which he obtains, thanks to the aid of grateful wolves, bees, and crayfish, and destroys the snake by striking it on the forehead with the stone which was destined to be its death. In a third version of the story, the hero finds in the forbidden chamber Koshchei the Deathless, in a cauldron amid flames, boiling in pitch. There he has been, he declares, for 15 years, having been lured there by the beauty of Anastasia the Fair. In a fourth, in which the hero's three sisters marry three beggars, who turn out to be snakes with 20, 30, and 40 heads apiece, Koshchei is found in the forbidden chamber, seated on a horse which is chained to a cauldron. He begs the hero to unloose the horse, promising in return to save him from 3 deaths. Into the mystery of the forbidden chamber I will not enter fully at present. Suffice to say that there can be little doubt as to its being the same as that in which Bluebeard kept the corpses of his dead wives. In the Russian, as well as in the Oriental stories, it is generally the curiosity of a man, not of a woman, which leads to the opening of the prohibited room. In the west of Europe, the fatal inquisitiveness is more frequently ascribed to a woman. For parallels, see the German stories of Marienkind and Fischer's Vogel, Grimm, K.M., Noss, and also the notes in BD. EEE. PPE. Less familiar than these is, probably, the story of Die Eisernen Stiefel, Wolf's Deutsche Hausmärchen, No, in which the hero opens a forbidden door, that of a summer house, and sees deep down below him the earth, and on the earth his father's palace, and is seized by a sudden longing after his former home. The Wallachian story of The Immured Mother, Shot, No, resembles Grimm's Marienkind in many points, but its forbidden chamber differs from that of the German tale. In the latter, the rash intruder sees Die Treinigkeit im Feuer und Glanz sitzen. In the former, the Holy Mother of God healing the wounds of her Son, the Lord Christ. In the Neapolitan story of Le Très Couronné, Pentamerone? Pentamerone? No. The forbidden chamber contains 3 maidens, clothed all in gold, sitting and seeming to slumber upon as many thrones. Liebrecht's translation, I. The Esthonian tale of the wife murderer, Löwe's Estnische Märchen, No, is remarkably, not to say suspiciously, like that French story of Bluebeard, which has so often made our young blood run cold. Sister Anne is represented, and so are the rescuing brothers, the latter in the person of the heroine's old friend and playmate, Toenis, the gooseherd. Several very curious Gaelic versions of the story are given by Mr. Campbell. Tales of the West Highlands? No. I. 2 of the 3 daughters of a poor widow look into a forbidden chamber, find it full of dead gentlewomen, get stained knee-deep in blood, and refuse to give a drop of milk to a cat which offers its services, so their heads are chopped off. The 3rd daughter makes friends with the cat, which licks off the telltale blood, so she escapes detection. In a Greek story, Han, I, the hero discovers in the 41st room of a castle belonging to a Dracos, who had given him leave to enter 40 only, a magic horse. And before the door of the room he finds a pool of gold, in which he becomes gilded. In another, No, a prince finds in the forbidden 40th a lake in which fairies of the swan maiden species are bathing. In a third, No, the 40th room contains a golden horse and a golden dog which assist their bold releaser. In a 4th, No, it imprisons a fair maiden shining like the sun, whom the demon proprietor of the castle has hung up within it by her hair. As usual, all these stories are hard to understand, but one of the most important of their Oriental equivalents is perfectly intelligible. When Saktideva, in the 5th book of the Kathasarit comes after long travel to the Golden City and is welcomed as her destined husband by its princess, she warns him not to ascend the central terrace of her palace. Of course he does so, and finds 3 chambers, in each of which lies the lifeless form of a fair maiden. After gazing at these seeming corpses, in one of which he recognizes his first love, he approaches a horse which is grazing beside a lake. The horse kicks him into the water. He sinks deep and comes up again in his native land. The whole of the story is, towards its termination, fully explained by one of its principal characters, one of the 4 maidens whom Saktideva simultaneously marries, with the version of this romance in the Arabian Nights History of the 3rd Royal Mendicant, Lane, everyone is doubtless acquainted. A less familiar story is that of Kandapaketu, in the 2nd book of the Hitopadesa, who lives happily for a time as the husband of the beautiful semi-divine queen of the Golden City. At last, contrary to her express commands, he ventures to touch a picture of a Vidyadhari. In an instant, the pictured demigoddess gives him a kick which sends him flying back into his own country. For an explanation of the myth which lies at the root of all these stories, see Cox's Mythology of the Aryan Nations, IIP. See also Professor de Gubernatis's Zoological Mythology, EI. We will now take one of those versions of the story which describe how Koshchei's death is brought about by the destruction of that extraneous object on which his existence depends. The incident is one which occupies a prominent place in the stories of this class, current in all parts of Europe and Asia, and its result is almost always the same. But the means by which that result is brought about differ considerably in different lands. In the Russian tales, the death of the evil being with whom the hero contends the substance, namely, the destruction of which involves his death, is usually the last of a sequence of objects, either identical with or closely resembling those mentioned in the following story of